Chapter 1186. Strife, chaos, conspiracy, war, death. Finally, there was a revival of the ancient gods in the divine Atlas. In just a short span of 2 to 3 months, the originally peaceful situation on this continent had suddenly become turbulent, as if all the contradictions and crises had suddenly erupted. The existing order was collapsing. All kinds of ambitious people and demons could not help but jump out, trying to use this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve their own unspeakable goals. Their appearance, in turn, accelerated the speed of the collapse of order. Even the remote areas of many countries had entered a state of anarchy. Villages and towns were controlled by some bandits, robbers, and warlords, and scrupulously using violence to trample on the submissive people at the bottom. In addition, there were conflicts caused by friction, hostility, and even hatred between the churches of different gods. It was just like a pot of boiling oil. Even if nothing was thrown in, it still made one's scalp tingle. In this violent new era, some people tried their best to climb up the ladder, trying to change their fate with the help of the chaotic ladder. However, more people were at a loss and went with the flow. They didn't know what would happen in the future, and they didn't know when they would suddenly die. After all, the lives of mortals were so fragile and cheap. Sometimes, just for a mouthful of food, they would raise a butcher's knife and kill the other party. Appreciating this grand tragedy that he had personally caused, Zhang Cheng's calm face did not have a trace of expression. He just stared at the magic mirror in the upper right corner, at the exquisite and beautiful face that belonged to the dark goddess. Without asking, he knew that he was waiting for the other party to make the final choice. Because at most, after a period of time, the next god would awaken from his ignorance and begin to fight for faith and control of this world. He did not believe that the other party would watch all this happen without taking any action. It should be known that the competition between gods was often more brutal than the struggle for power between mortals. Once it began, it meant the beginning of a marathon that would last for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. Unless one party was completely wiped out, there would never be a day when it would end. Furthermore, physically destroying the other party did not mean that they could let their guard down. They had to carefully erase all traces of the other party's existence in this world to prevent someone from finding traces of the existence of this god, or the remaining temples and books, which would lead to the resurrection of the dead god. But what was interesting was that, in the face of more and more threats, Mao Sha did not act like most gods and eliminate the threats in the first place. Instead, she hid in her own kingdom and did not step out. At the same time, she ordered her churches to ignore the sudden emergence of competitors and let them continue to develop and grow. Needless to say, the reason why she was so fearless was either because she had a countermeasure or because she had already made up her mind. No matter which one it was, the outcome would soon be revealed. Let's see how long you can endure and hide. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and muttered to himself with a faint smile. Just as he finished speaking, a passage flickering with white light suddenly appeared out of thin air, continuously absorbing the surrounding matter and energy, quickly forming a void area. In the next second, the ball of light suddenly exploded, and a small strip made of an unknown substance was sprayed out from it. As the whole process was quick and sudden, Zhang Cheng did not have time to react before everything returned to its original state. He carefully picked up the strip that had fallen to the ground, only to find that the surface temperature of this thing was shockingly low. It had only appeared for a short while, but it had already frozen the entire room, and there was a line of vague small words on the side. "Come to me, I need your help." Oh, it seems that this seems to be a small thing similar to a message in a bottle, but I don't know who left the message and where it came from. Zhang Cheng touched his chin, his eyes revealing a strong sense of curiosity. This was because he could feel that the strip in his hand was not a known substance at all. In fact, it should not even exist. In order to find out the truth, he immediately took the strip to the laboratory located in the center of the huge maze, trying to decipher the possible hidden information inside. In particular, the line of small words on the top was obviously some kind of technology that directly connected with the mind. No matter who saw it, it would automatically be converted into a language and text that they could understand. In just a short while, the words on the strip had already changed hundreds of thousands of ways, and it seemed like there was no end to them. After all, the knowledge that the Juggernaut possessed covered the billions of civilizations in the entire material universe. There was no language that they could not understand or read. This also meant that this small thing could unknowingly explore one's memories and thoughts, and then react accordingly. Unbelievable. I really can't believe that this thing formed purely from the condensation of mind and consciousness can exist in the material world. This is great. This is really great. I actually found a way forward in the darkness. Accompanied by a slightly neurotic laugh, Zhang Cheng felt that he was back to being a lunatic. The more he learned about this tiny strip, the more excited he became. There was even a trace of infatuation and craziness. In his eyes, the unknown meant that he had not reached the end of his path of transcendence, and it meant that he could continue to evolve. However, what Zhang Cheng didn't know was that far away in the spiritual universe, which was completely opposite to the physical universe, the friend of the initiator, the man with glasses, was running along a road that was covered with white thorns. For some reason, the road seemed to have no end, and he didn't know it. As he ran, he kept cursing through gritted teeth. Damn it. No matter who receives my message, you better hurry up or else. Before he could finish speaking, a cute creature only the size of a fist swept across the sky. Not far away, a giant beast bigger than a mountain saw it and immediately curled up in fear, trembling as if it had encountered a terrible natural enemy. The cute fist-sized creature immediately swooped down, opened its mouth, and let out an ear-piercing shriek, and then slammed into the giant beast. Logically speaking, a collision like this should not cause any damage at all. However, in this world where everything was determined by the mind, the giant beast did not even last a second before it was smashed into pieces, turning into white light that filled the sky. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1187. The cute creature opened its mouth and kept shuttling in the air like a greedy bird, swallowing all the scattered light spots into its stomach. When the last ball of light was swallowed, its body expanded countless times in an instant. Then, it returned to its original state. An extremely satisfied expression appeared on its face. It wobbled and left the endless thorny forest. Horrifying. Strange. The bespectacled man suppressed the fear in his heart and carefully walked out of his hiding place. He let out a sigh of relief and laughed bitterly at himself. It's too scary. Looks like I still know too little about this universe, and it's completely different from the laws of the material world. There's no pattern at all. After saying that, he took out a crudely shaped stone knife and gently cut a section of the vine. He then aimed his mouth at the crack and sucked in mouthfuls of the milky white juice. In the blink of an eye, his body seemed to have been replenished by some kind of energy, and the parts that were originally transparent became solid once again. There was no doubt that the milky white juice was like food in the material world that could replenish a large amount of mental energy. In order to enter this magical world, the bespectacled man had abandoned his body and even the brain that he was proud of. He thought that he could rely on his intelligence to deal with all dangers like before. But now, he realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. All experience and knowledge would not be of any use here. The only thing that could be used here was unwavering faith and the purest and most primitive madness in his heart. After resting for a few minutes, the bespectacled man took a deep breath and began to move into the depths of the thorny forest again. After such a long period of observation, he understood that there was no place that was safe, and every corner could have unexpected situations and accidents at any time. At the same time, Zhangqing also discovered some of the mysteries of the spiritual universe from the strips, especially the hidden coordinates that aroused his great interest. A space outside of all dimensions? A universe that's dominated by mental energy? He looked at the runes that flickered with silver light and had a thoughtful expression on his face. One must know that although the universe was also multidimensional, it was still based on matter and energy. There would never be a space that was completely composed of mental energy. At most, it would be affected by mental energy. This was because spirit belonged to nothingness, something that was completely detached from material existence. However, he did not recklessly rush to the corresponding coordinates. Instead, he sat down alone and fell into deep thought. First, he needed to determine whether this thing was some kind of prank, a plot against him, or if it really existed. Secondly, what kind of connection did the so-called spiritual universe have with the current universe? Would he encounter any danger if he entered? Finally, and most importantly, he had to find a way to break through the barriers of matter and break free from the restraints of the material universe. Obviously, none of these things were simple. They all required a lot of time to try and verify. Just as he was hesitating where to start, a powerful force suddenly tore through space violently and squeezed in from the other side. "Ah, so you were hiding here." Along with the familiar voice, the initiator, who had disappeared for a while, finally reappeared. However, unlike the last time, he was now exuding an aura that was incompatible with his surroundings, as if he was isolated from a certain boundary. "It's you." Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. The initiator nodded. "That's right. It's me. It seems like you've also received a message from the spiritual universe, haven't you? You know about this thing?" Zhang Cheng's eyes glowed slightly. He raised his head and looked into the initiator's eyes, as if trying to determine if he was lying. Unfortunately, whether it was his demeanor, tone, or expression, he could not find any trace of lying. On the contrary, he could feel the complex emotions in the initiator's heart. It was an intense conflict and choice. "Of course I know, because it was sent by my best friend. How about it? Are you interested in joining forces with me again? Completely give up your power and identity as a ruler, and even your life, and head to that spiritual world to explore?" The initiator did not speak too much nonsense like before and directly offered an invitation. In order to find out the truth, he immediately brought the strip-shaped object to the laboratory at the center of the huge maze, trying to decipher the information that might be hidden within. In particular, the small line of words at the top was clearly some kind of technology that directly connected to the spirit. No matter who saw it, it would automatically be converted into a language and words that they could understand. In just a short while, the words on the strip-shaped object had changed into hundreds of thousands of words, and it seemed like it could continue to change endlessly. After all, the knowledge that the rulers possessed covered the billions of civilizations in the entire material universe. There was no language that they could not understand or read. This also meant that this small object could unknowingly explore one's memories and thoughts, and then react accordingly. Unbelievable. I really can't believe that this thing formed purely from the condensation of spirit and consciousness can exist in the material world. Haha, wonderful, this is wonderful. I've actually found a way forward in the darkness. Accompanied by a slightly neurotic laugh, Zhang Cheng felt that his former crazy self had returned. The more he understood this small, strip-shaped object, the more excited he became. There was even a trace of obsession and madness. In his eyes, the unknown meant that he had not reached the end of his path of transcendence. It meant that he could continue to evolve. However, what Zhang Cheng did not know was that far away in the spiritual universe, which was completely opposite to the material universe, the good friend of the initiator, the man with glasses, was currently running wildly along a road full of white thorns that seemed to have no end for some reason. As he ran, he kept cursing through gritted teeth. "Damn it! No matter who receives my message, you better hurry up, or else." Before he could finish speaking, a cute creature only the size of a fist swept across the sky. Not far away, a giant beast bigger than a mountain saw it, and immediately curled up in fear, trembling as if it had encountered a terrible natural enemy. The cute fist-sized creature immediately swooped down, opened its mouth, and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Then, it slammed into the giant beast. Logically speaking, a collision like this should not have caused any damage at all. However, in this world where everything was determined by one spirit, the giant beast did not even last a second. It was instantly smashed into pieces, turning into white light that filled the sky. Chapter 1188. At the center of the black hole, which encompassed dozens of massive galaxies, the Order Parliament's Research Institute was furiously searching for any remaining information, trying to analyze what had happened at the coordinates. It was to the extent that the sovereigns all maintained their silence, unwilling to divulge even the slightest bit of what they had seen. As for the trouble caused by the existence of the black hole itself, it was rather insignificant. To these life forms that had lived in the high-dimensional universe since birth, the so-called celestial bodies that even light couldn't escape were, in fact, nothing more than a collection of slightly larger particles. As long as they were willing, they could make this super-large black hole disappear completely at any time. Regrettably, regardless of whether they had such an ability, the Order Parliament's sovereigns ordered that nothing in the center of the black hole was to be destroyed, as if waiting for something to happen. However, just as these cyborg life forms were nervously working, an unfamiliar intruder had silently passed through the layers of security and arrived at the huge rock floating at the center of the black hole. For some reason, this rock was able to maintain its original appearance under the influence of the black hole's enormous gravitational force. In particular, there was a constantly flickering light dot on the simple platform. Clearly, this intruder was none other than Zhang Cheng, who had rushed over from the other side of the universe. And that white dot was the coordinate he had obtained from the strip-shaped object. This is the point of connection between the material universe and the spiritual universe, an entrance that hasn't been locked. Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and muttered softly to himself, his tone full of uncertainty. This was because he could sense that if he took another step closer, that tiny white dot would release an extremely terrifying power, forcing him to make a choice. Either he would be completely erased, or he would have to give up his identity as a sovereign, or even his physical body and life, and pass through and reach the other side in his spiritual form. Of course, this also proved that the spiritual universe completely existed and was connected to the material universe in a very special way. However, as for who was the master and who belonged to whom, he had to personally experience it to know. Unlike the old sovereigns who were terrified at the mere mention of it, Zhang Cheng was filled with joy and excitement at this new discovery, so much so that he didn't care at all that he would have to pay a huge price to explore it. This was because he already understood the nature of the sovereigns and where their powerful strength came from. However, he still didn't know anything about this spiritual universe that the sovereigns loathed and even feared. It was a complete blank. You really came. As the familiar voice rang in his ears, the initiator walked out of his hiding spot and casually crushed a working cyborg to death. After disintegrating the corpse into particles and destroying it, he pointed at the white light spot and said, "How is it? Do you feel its power? That limitless spiritual power. His spirit is stronger than any sovereign's." "Of course, I'm not blind." Zhang Cheng shrugged expressionlessly. "So now, can you give me a definite answer? I've always known that you and I are the same kind of people, the kind that looks completely opposite on the surface, but is exactly the same on the inside. We all have strong ambitions and desires in our hearts, as well as endless thirst for knowledge." When he said this, the initiator exuded an unparalleled confidence, as if he wasn't worried about being rejected at all. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "No, you're wrong. I won't give you an answer right now. From your reaction, I could see that your friend's situation is rather bad, so much so that you have to give up on your original plan. You didn't even do any preparation work and want to drag me along with you on this adventure. However, I'm not an idiot. I won't play around with my life for a stranger or even an enemy. I'll go, but I'll have to wait for a while." "Wait until how long?" The initiator subconsciously frowned. "I don't know. It could be a few days, a few weeks, or a few months, or more than half a year. In any case, before the weapon is completed, I won't act rashly. I suggest that you don't act rashly either. Otherwise, the Order Council won't let you off. Even though we've always said that the reason why truths and taboos exist is so that one day they can be broken. However, Don't forget that when you break them, there'll be a powerful backlash. If you're not careful, you might lose your life. After saying this, Zhang Cheng glanced at the ancient planet at the edge of the black hole in the distance. It was the lair of the Order Council. He dared to bet that if they knew that the initiator was hiding right under their noses, they would spare no expense to kill the main culprit who had caused so much destruction and panic, or imprison him forever. Don't think that just because the sovereigns viewed killing each other as taboo, it meant that they didn't have such methods. On the contrary, the first few sovereigns to be born would definitely have grasped and known more, not nothing. After all, a taboo had to be discovered and used first. Only then would they realize the danger. Oof, just based on them? The initiator sneered, a look of disdain on his face. There was no need to ask. He had already read the contents of the recording device and understood what the sovereigns were truly afraid of. You can look down on them, but you can't underestimate them. Don't forget that being ancient means that they hold many secrets that no one knows. Perhaps your trump card can only be considered a threat in the eyes of the other party, but it can't reach the level of being fatal. All right, that's all I have to say. If you want to listen, then listen. If you don't want to listen, then pretend that I didn't say anything. Since the existence of the spiritual universe has been confirmed, there's no need for me to continue staying. I hope that by the time I make my decision, you'll still be alive. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng didn't care about the other party's reaction at all. He directly passed through the massive core at the center of the black hole and disappeared without a trace. Movements of this level naturally couldn't escape the surveillance system that was everywhere. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of millions of cyborg life forms swarmed over, attempting to surround the intruder and wait for the Order Council's sovereigns to arrive. However, the initiator merely waved his hand, and a large expanse of void appeared at the center of the black hole, wildly devouring all matter and energy. In less than a minute, the army that was as numerous as ants disappeared in a thin air, and the initiator himself safely retreated before the other sovereigns arrived. Chapter 1189. Damn it, it's him. He's been here. That's right, it's that guy's aura. But he seems to have found a helper. Chaos. I can feel the power of chaos. Could he have come to some unspeakable agreement with the Chaos faction? Not long after the initiators left, a few huge balls of light descended from the sky, their bodies exuding boundless power and majesty. It was obvious that they were the highest-ranking members of the Order Parliament, the rulers who represented the ultimate order of the material universe. Obviously, when they heard the alarm, they immediately put down what they were doing and rushed over. Unfortunately, they were still a step too late. Looking at the light that made the rulers extremely uncomfortable and even fearful, one of them couldn't help but suggest, "We can't wait any longer. We have to eliminate the threat first. I think we should focus on destroying this connection point first, or that lunatic will definitely use it to deal with each and every one of us." No, we can't destroy it. Don't tell me you haven't learned your lesson, or have you forgotten what happened the last time we did this? The universe is a cycle that can't be interrupted. Once there's a problem with the cycle, all the rulers will die. Our power and eternity are given to us by the material universe, so it can't be damaged no matter what. Another ruler retorted sternly. Cycle? You still have the face to mention this word? If I remember correctly, it was your reckless behavior that caused the collapse of one of the key points of the cycle. You almost killed all of us, and we still haven't recovered yet. The former began to bring up the past without mercy. As old acquaintances who had lived for who knew how long, they understood each other very well. Hence, there wasn't the slightest hint of euphemism in their words, and everything was straightforward. Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel, the leader of the rulers couldn't help but yell, "Enough! Now isn't the time for infighting. We can't destroy the connection point for now. Not only is it a problem with the cycle, but it'll also waste too much of our time and effort. You have to know that we've already declared war on the Chaos faction a while ago. If we don't act now, they'll definitely take action. It's all that bastard's fault. He must have intentionally instigated the Parliament to declare war, hoping to borrow their strength to restrain us." The hegemon, who had the body of a giant and crimson skin, swung his fists viciously, venting the anger in his heart. Calm down. Since all of this is a conspiracy, we must not let him succeed. Why don't we sign a new peace agreement with the Chaos faction and invite them to surround and kill this criminal who violated the taboo? The Juggernaut, whose body was made up of countless floating crystals, gave another idea. But before he could finish, the guy who spoke first couldn't help but question, re-sign the peace agreement? Do you think that if you were the Chaos faction, you would give up your current advantage and make peace with the enemy that you have been entangled with all your life? In any case, I won't. I'm willing to bet that they'll definitely refuse and wait patiently for an opportunity to deal us a fatal blow. The only thing we can do is to ally with a neutral faction and maintain the current balance so that they won't dare to act rashly. Ally with the neutral faction? We just showed them strong hostility and even hope to work with the Primal Chaos sect to destroy them. Although it's a little depressing to say this, it's impossible for us to gain any allies. Everywhere we look is an enemy. The more dangerous it is, the more we have to unite and make use of the advantage of order. We have to defend ourselves and not let the enemy see our weakness. Otherwise, this Juggernaut deliberately dragged out his words, the meaning of which was self-evident. It must be known that once the balance was broken, intense conflicts would definitely erupt. Before tasting pain and despair, it was impossible to calm down easily. However, the Order Parliament didn't know that just as they were discussing how to salvage the situation, the Chaos faction's juggernauts were still gathered together, sinister smiles on their faces. After a few minutes, Gru, who had the appearance of a beetle, finally broke the silence. He stated in a slightly deep voice, "I believe everyone has heard that a major incident happened in the Order Council not long ago. That fellow who was engaged in taboo research not only killed Satara, but also created an unprecedentedly large black hole. Based on the information we have now, we can basically conclude that he has opened a connection to the spiritual universe." Wait, a Juggernaut, who was bathed in nuclear fusion flames, suddenly interrupted. Did that fellow kill Satara first and then open the connection to the spiritual universe? Or did he open the connection to the spiritual universe first and then kill Satara? That's right. This is very important. If it's the former, it means that it's very likely that he opened the connection by coincidence. If it's the latter, it means that he has grasped the corresponding technique. If he can open it once, he can open it a second or third time. This is a huge threat to all of us. Another Juggernaut agreed. Sorry, I can't be sure for now. Gru sighed helplessly. It wasn't that he didn't want to know, but he didn't dare to approach the center of the black hole for no reason. After all, the two factions were already in a state of war to a certain extent. Who knew what would happen if he approached? What about our newcomer? Didn't he say anything? You must know that there's some kind of connection between the two of them. It can even be said that they're telepathic. The leader of the Chaos faction stretched out a finger that resembled a dragon's claw and lightly tapped the ground. Maybe he knows, maybe he doesn't. Regarding this point, he didn't give a clear answer himself. However, I think that he's almost certain that the newcomer will go back to find him. Gru thought for a moment and gave a rather vague answer. If that's the case, why don't we use the newcomer as bait to lure the guy who caused such a huge commotion? As long as we capture him, we'll be able to learn the secrets of countless Order factions. We might even be able to instigate one or two of them. After all, there are two fellows whose confidence in Order has been shaken. It's time to help them. Ha ha ha. Well said. The universe must be chaotic. Only chaos can ensure that the cycle of eternity continues. Leave the matter of instigation to me. I really hope to see the day when the Order faction falls apart. Chapter 1190. The overt and covert struggles between the rulers did not affect Zhang Cheng's plan. To be precise, when he returned to that remote planet, he discovered that the second god had already awakened. She began to perform miracles in the sky above a city near the south of the continent, attracting a large number of believers. Unlike the dark goddess Musa, this god was rather high profile. She even demanded that the true ruler of the city acknowledge the church's position, or she would threaten divine punishment. No matter how noble a family was, they were still mortals in front of God. In the end, the ruler of the city shrank back and voluntarily gave up his power, choosing to flee with his wealth and family. This was because the fanatical religious atmosphere had completely overturned the thousands of years of noble tradition. Instead, it became a matter of whether one's faith was pious enough. Some idiots, even if they did not have any abilities, could still be promoted to a relatively high position by the gods as long as they contributed enough power of faith. Simply put, money and power had all lost their original value. A new set of rules based on faith was replacing the old, becoming the new order of the entire world. It had to be said that this change was a wake-up call for all the nobles who were used to being high and mighty. Even those who had originally intended to support other church forces and use them to get rid of the dark goddess started to crazily suppress the spread of religion in their own territories at all costs, regardless of whether the other party had the support of a true god or not. The foolish actions of these fellows fully proved that no ruler would be willing to hand over their power, even if they clearly knew that doing so would lead to extremely serious consequences. Clearly, the terrifying thing about religion was its powerful ability to incite and brainwash. It made the majority of ordinary people who were not very smart to begin with give up thinking and wholeheartedly give their spirit and faith to the so-called God. For the will of their God, believers would often do anything, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. As a matter of fact, not long after the suppression began, the churches began to gather the power at hand, pulling together one team after another, bypassing the important cities protected by tall walls to attack the manors and caravans of the nobles. There was no head-on confrontation as expected. Moreover, no voter would be so stupid as to let ordinary people who had not undergone any training engage in a battle with experienced professional soldiers. On the contrary, the annihilation of Dark Church made them realize that they absolutely shouldn't confront powerful enemies head-on. Instead, they should rely on the advantage of being constantly on the move to attack the manors, workshops, and caravans used by the nobles to produce wealth and tax. In this way, ordinary people who did not have much combat experience would be slowly trained. At the same time, they could also seize large amounts of resources and equipment through raids, slowly turning amateur soldiers into professional soldiers. Not only could he preserve his strength, but he could also continuously strengthen himself. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would know what to choose. What's more, the infrastructure of this continent was so backward. After leaving the major cities and transportation networks, most of the rural areas were nothing but muddy roads. When the weather was good, they could still make do with it. But once it was cloudy and raining, the large amount of mud would exhaust all of the passers-by's physical strength and energy. If it took a few more days, even if their morale was high when they set off, it would instantly drop to the bottom. In addition, logistics was also a problem that could never be solved. If the number of soldiers sent out was small, they might not be a match for the armed forces of the church. But if the number of soldiers sent out increased, they would need more logistical supplies. At this time, the muddy road would become an insurmountable moat. As long as they sent out a dozen small teams to harass them day and night, they would take advantage of the chaos to set fire to the grain that had been loaded for generations. When the enemy's grain was about to be eaten, they would naturally retreat obediently. They would not stay and continue to aimlessly search for the enemy. Guerrilla warfare was always the most troublesome tactic for the regular army. Even if they entered the era of firearms, those guerrillas full of mountains and jungles could still make a powerful military empire like the United States lose face. Not to mention this kind of extremely backward cold weapon warfare. Looking at the image transmitted back from the magic mirror, Zhang Chen couldn't help but slightly raise the corner of his mouth. He smiled and muttered to himself, "Religion and God are indeed the natural enemies of all civilizations. As long as they exist, the progress of knowledge and technology will become extremely slow or even completely stagnate. After all, in the eyes of God, the development of knowledge and technology means that rationality will dominate society and the number of non-believers will skyrocket. But on the other hand, regardless of whether knowledge or technology advances, intelligent life is still intelligent life. No matter how stupid or ignorant they can still provide faith. Therefore, in the eyes of God, they hope that their believers will never become intelligent. You're right. With the appearance of these gods and religions, the original order has entered the countdown to collapse. At most, in a few years or even a dozen years, the era of God will descend. Perhaps you should urge the Dark Goddess. She will soon lose the right to choose. Isolde, who was standing at the side, carefully reminded him. Remind? Why should I remind her? Don't misunderstand. She is indeed very important to me, but she is not indispensable. I am not a rigid person, and I don't like to let the future become fixed. I will give everyone who participates in the game a fair choice. They can decide their own fate. Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and explained in detail. He only needed to inject a soul into the Tree of Chaos. As for who this soul was, it didn't matter at all. If the Dark Goddess Musa gave up her last chance, she would probably die completely. Just as Isolde was about to open his mouth to say something, a violent explosion suddenly sounded from the top of the Tree of Chaos. It was the aftermath of the collision between two powerful gods. It seemed to tear the sky apart, revealing an incomparably deep and dark universe. Isolde rushed to the balcony in shock, his eyes wide as he looked at the incomparably magnificent scene in the distance. His voice was full of uncertainty. It's finally begun. The two gods are fighting over the ownership of the fruit of chaos. I knew they would not refuse such a temptation, even if they knew it could be a huge trap. Then what do you plan to do? Isolde asked cautiously. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. No, we won't do anything. We'll just quietly watch the show. No matter who wins in the end, the winner will always be me. Chapter 1191. Boom! Accompanied by an ear-piercing explosion and a powerful shockwave, the goddess of darkness, Mao Sha, flew back dozens of meters before she managed to stabilize herself. She frowned and asked, "You are the moon goddess?" "Yes, I am the moon goddess Maria. You are the dark goddess?" The self-proclaimed moon goddess Maria's eyes flashed with intense vigilance. After a short exchange, they both realized how powerful and difficult the other party was. They also understood that it would not be easy to snatch the fruit of the Tree of Chaos. "I am the Dark Goddess. If you don't want to die, you better leave immediately, or don't blame me for being rude." Realizing that she could not easily achieve her goal through violence, Mao Sha immediately began to threaten her, trying to scare her away. Unfortunately, the moon goddess Maria was not a fool. Not only did she not have the intention to leave, she even took a step forward and provoked. "Who do you think you are? The Supreme Creator? No, you are the same as me. We are both gods born from the faith of the mortals on this planet. In terms of power, there's not much difference. Besides, you can't beat me. When night falls and the moon hangs in the sky, it will be the beginning of your defeat." There was no need to ask. The moon goddess was at her strongest at night. At that time, the moonlight would endlessly bring her strength and recovery ability. Any smart god would choose to avoid it instead of foolishly fighting in the opponent's home field. However, Mao Sha immediately sneered and retorted, "You think the night is your advantage? Idiot! I am a dark goddess. Once the sun sets, the entire world will belong to me. I am darkness, the night, the most primitive fear in people's hearts. Nothing can be my enemy at night, not even you, the moon goddess." "Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Let's see who is the true ruler of the night." The moon goddess Maria stroked her long silver hair that was as white as moonlight. Compared to the dark goddess, who always wore a black veil wherever she went, her clothes were much more gorgeous. The slightly transparent white dress not only perfectly showed off her golden ratio figure, but also set off an indescribable purity and nobility. "Gentlemen, I have a suggestion. I wonder if you're interested in hearing it?" While the goddesses were stuck in an awkward stalemate, Islands, who had been playing dead all this time, suddenly spoke. To be precise, it was using the power of the soul to directly communicate with the brain and soul. "Oh, What suggestion? Mao Shan knew a lot about this strange fruit, so she didn't show the slightest bit of surprise. Instead, she asked calmly, "It's simple. Since both of you want to eat me, why don't you play a game? I can be the judge." Island's voice was filled with excitement and anticipation as he spoke, as if being devoured was the entire meaning of his existence. What about the game's content and rules? The moon god Maria finally recovered from her momentary shock. She narrowed her eyes and probed carefully. In her chaotic memories, she seemed to have never seen a fruit with independent consciousness and thoughts. The game is simple. It was also very fair. Both of you divide your divine power into 10 equal portions as chips, then throw a die. The one with the higher number wins, and the one with the lower number loses. The winner can take away a portion of the opponent's divine power until one of them completely loses their divine power. With that, Islands controlled a branch of the Tree of Chaos and dropped it on the ground. It changed shape at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye, and finally became a six-sided die. That sounds interesting, but I have a question. How can you guarantee that the loser will willingly hand over their chips? The moon god Maria pointed out the sharpest question. Gods weren't people who liked to follow the rules. They often relied on their unparalleled power to play tricks on mortals without restraint, just for the fun of living or to kill time. If their power and life were threatened, most gods would turn the table and run away without hesitation. As for paying the bet obediently, it was almost impossible unless there was a powerful middleman. Ha ha! Have you all forgotten where you are? This is the crown of the Tree of Chaos. Any little tricks are useless in the face of absolute power. Islands laughed wildly as he controlled the vines to lock the legs of the goddesses with lightning speed. The next second, an indescribably huge suction force washed away almost all of their divine power, leaving only a tiny bit to maintain their basic survival. Damn it! What did you do? The moon god Maria said in a panic. Relax. I just stored all of your divine power. When the game is over, I will naturally return it to you. Now, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and throw the die. Islands urged as he controlled the vines to fiddle with the die that had fallen on the ground. The two goddesses looked at each other in horror, as if they couldn't believe that their divine power had been taken away just like that. After a few minutes, the dark goddess Musa took a deep breath, picked up the die that had fallen on the ground, and said, I'll go first. Without any unnecessary movements, she directly threw the die on the ground. The small wooden die rolled a few meters along the tree branch, and soon stopped at 5 points. As a six-sided die, this was not a small number, second only to the full score of 6 points. Normally, with such a result on the first throw, one should be able to relax a little. However, Musa did not dare to let her guard down at all. She stared nervously at the die that the other party had picked up and held in his hand. This was not a gamble in the ordinary sense. It was an ultimate duel where one's life, future, and fate were at stake. No matter who absorbed such a huge amount of divine power, they would destroy the other party at the first opportunity and become the only true god in the world. It's my turn now, but before we begin, I have a small request. The moon god Maria did not throw the die casually like the former did. Instead, she tried to negotiate. Unfortunately, Islands refused without even thinking about it. Sorry, I don't accept any additional conditions. Either throw the die or forfeit and admit defeat. Don't try to cheat. This is the power of the Tree of Chaos, a treasure that can interfere with the relationship between energy and mass. Sigh. All right, then let's begin. I hope my luck isn't too bad. The moon god Maria sighed and threw the die out casually. After a few rolls, the die that came out on top was a 6. Chapter 1192. It seems that the moon goddess has won the first round. According to the agreement, 1/10 of your divine power belongs to her. With that, Islands did not hesitate to control the vines and injected a portion of divine power into the moon goddess's body. Instantly, a faint divine radiance radiated from Maria's body. The power she had temporarily lost had returned. Although it was only 1/10 of it, it was already much stronger than the dark goddess who was only left with a shell. She could even kill her only competitor for the time being with just a flick of her finger. However, she was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, she looked at the strange-looking fruit hanging on the crown of the tree. Because the other party's power was too strong and too strange, it could deprive the gods of their divine power and then transfer it to another god. She was not sure if she would cause any serious consequences if she attacked now. In contrast, Mao Sha's face suddenly became cold. One of her hands subconsciously clenched the holy sword that had been integrated with the dark divine power. She seemed to be hesitating whether to use her final trump card. But soon, she gave up the idea of using force to deal with the enemy. After all, she was not at the end of her rope yet. She had only lost once and could lose at least 9 more times. Thinking of this, the dark goddess directly picked up the dice at her feet and sneered, "Don't be complacent. You have only won once. Soon, I will get it back with interest. Now, let the second round begin quickly." As soon as she finished speaking, she directly threw out the dice that represented fate and the future in her hand. There was no cheating, no using divine power to interfere with the rolling trajectory of the dice. Everything was left to the illusory luck. It could be said that there was no fairer way of gambling in the whole world. Therefore, the two goddesses did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction or resentment. Instead, they focused on throwing the dice again and again, using that ridiculous and ironic little number to determine who would be the final winner. Mao Sha even began to wonder if she was wrong. She should not have held such strong doubts and directly snatched the fruit. But now, it was too late to say anything. She had to win the bet first before she was qualified to decide what to do next. Time ticked by, and the dice kept rolling on the ground. The two goddesses' hearts were like riding a roller coaster. Sometimes they were happy, sometimes they were gloomy, because every time they threw, their divine power would increase or decrease. When the thoughtful dark goddess gradually turned the situation around and took 90% of her opponent's divine power, she took off her black veil and revealed her extremely beautiful face. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, "Sorry, dear moon goddess, it seems that I won this bet." "Win. Don't jump to conclusions. I still have a chance." Maria raised her chin, still maintaining her arrogant posture. Compared with her competitors, there were not too many traces of mortals in her mind. She was 100% a primordial god, so she always retained the innate dignity and pride in her bones. Even in the face of death, he would never abandon his dignity as a god. Maria, 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 Maria's, Maria, Maria. Because as long as one wasn't a fool, they would understand that if one of the goddesses absorbed all of her opponent's power, then she could easily crush her opponent like a mortal after the bet was over. As you wish. The moon goddess didn't seem to care about her impending death. She casually threw the dice. After rolling a few times, the small 6-sided dice finally stumbled to a stop. The number on top was the smallest one. Seeing this, the dark goddess suddenly burst into laughter. "Ha ha! It seems that your fate has been decided, hasn't it? I'm very sorry. Although this was not my intention, your actions have made us enemies. Enemies that will not rest until one of us is dead. To be honest, I've always been curious about where the souls of gods go after they are killed. Today, I can finally experience it for myself." After saying this, she immediately picked up the dice and threw it out as fast as she could. Without any surprise, she won with 3 points. Game over. The winner is the dark goddess, Mireia. Alan straightforwardly announced the result. At the same time, he injected the last of his divine power into the winner's body. Feeling the divine power in her body that had nearly doubled, Mireia suddenly raised her hand and grabbed the moon goddess by the neck. She said in a cold and emotionless tone, "Farewell, my dear. You shouldn't have come here, and you shouldn't have had any ideas about that fruit. No, you don't understand at all. As a god, how can I not resist the temptation of having enough power to control the entire world? Not only me, those ancient gods that are about to awaken from the bell of chaos will fight for it. Let me give you a small suggestion. If you haven't decided whether to take the fruit or not, then use all your power to suppress the churches and believers of other gods. Kill every mortal that calls their names. Otherwise, you will soon see many powerful enemies appear." After saying this, the moon goddess slowly closed her eyes and waited for death to come. As a primordial god, she was not afraid of death. Similarly, she would not be truly killed. At least, she would not be truly killed by the dark goddess who was also a god. As long as those ancient shrines and ruins were still preserved in this world, and there were still people who remembered her name, she would have a chance to be resurrected again. "Thank you for your advice. I will seriously consider it." As the last word left her mouth, a powerful divine power burst out from Morea's hand. It immediately broke the moon goddess body and spirit. Because it was night, the white beam of light shot up into the sky. It could be seen clearly even from tens of kilometers away. At the same time, the moon hanging in the sky seemed to be sad for Morea's death. It became more and more transparent and finally disappeared from the night sky completely. At this moment, all the mortals who believed in the moon goddess felt unprecedented sadness and loss without exception. It was as if the most important thing in the depths of their souls had been lost forever. At the same time, the statues enshrined in the shrines either collapsed or shed bright red tears of blood. The death of a real god was far more terrifying and shocking than most ordinary people could imagine. It would even trigger a series of abnormalities related to the priesthood. In this world, the moon would not appear in the sky again for at least a year, because this moon did not represent a satellite that orbited around a planet. Chapter 1193. Defeating your opponent, seizing power and life. It must feel good, right? Just as the dark goddess was staring at her opponent's corpse in a daze, Islands' voice once again echoed in her mind. "No, it's nothing. Her failure was destined from the beginning, wasn't it?" Mao Sha turned around and glanced meaningfully at the towering tree of chaos. She was not a fool. She knew that it was definitely not a coincidence that so many ancient gods' churches appeared in the world at once. Nor was it some lucky person who discovered the ancient ruins. Someone was manipulating everything from behind the scenes. The other party wanted to force her to make a choice as soon as possible. And this guy was none other than the creator of the Tree of Chaos and the fruit, the mysterious man who was trying to hold her firmly in the palm of his hand. The dark goddess was not sure whether the other party was an extremely powerful god like her, or some other life form that was even more powerful than gods. No matter which one it was, the power he possessed now was not something she could contend against. Controlling fate, it was easier said than done. Because this thing had always been the privilege of the strongest, those who tried to break the shackles usually did not end well. Most of them were badly battered in front of the wall called fate. Islands undoubtedly understood what the other party was hinting at. He smiled and replied, "That's right. Her failure was destined from the beginning. No one can go against the will of the master. She can't, and you can't either. Now, tell me, are you ready to meet your fate?" Fate? What a ridiculous word. Do you think I'm the kind of chess piece that will be manipulated by others? Mao Sha asked with a sneer. "So, you still don't intend to swallow me?" Island's tone revealed a hint of playfulness. He did not seem to be in a hurry at all. After all, the moon goddess was only the first, and he still had enough chess pieces to use. No matter what the dark goddess was thinking, she had to face competition from one god after another. Those primitive gods did not care about the **T fate. They only wanted to obtain power strong enough to control the entire world, power from the Tree of Chaos and the core of the planet. Swallow you? No way. I won't be fooled. No matter what your evil master wants to do, I won't let him do as he wishes." Before Mao Sha could finish her words, a violent tremor suddenly came from below the giant tree, followed by a loud noise that resounded through the sky. Boom! My name is Ares, the god of earth, the master of earth and life. Mortals, kneel down and offer your pious faith. I will bless you and let you have inexhaustible food and minerals. Without a doubt, another god had awakened from the chaos, and it was the incomparably powerful god of earth. Interesting. What did you say just now? Alan teased with a smile that was not a smile. Although he did not have eyes, the goddess's expressions At first, he was full of confidence, then shock, then fear, nervousness, and anger. Mao Sha ignored the ridicule in the other party's words and directly reached out to pluck the fruit hanging on the crown of the tree. She opened her mouth and swallowed it without saying a word. Just 1 second later, a burly humanoid creature covered in hard rocks suddenly appeared out of thin air, its entire body brimming with the elemental power of the earth. Needless to say, he must be the owner of the voice just now, the earth god of this world. Compared to the moon goddess who had just been killed, his power was incomparable. After all, almost all the gods of earth in the world had an extremely close relationship with the planet itself. Some even represented the will of the planet itself. "No, give me back my fruit." Seeing the chaos fruit being swallowed, the earth god, Ares, immediately attacked in anger. He tried to use his strong arms and palms to tear his opponent to shreds and dig out the undigested fruit. "Idiot! It doesn't belong to you." Mao Sha mocked him with disdain and then shrouded the surroundings with darkness. The earth god did not even touch the corner of her dress and went from one end to the other. "Ah! Damn it! I won't forgive you. Go to hell. Despicable thief." Ares was clearly not a rational god. It was as if he was born with some kind of intense anger. He raised his hands and used his divine power to tear apart the earth below the Tree of Chaos. He wanted to summon a volcano and destroy everything in front of him. But before he could succeed, the Tree of Chaos immediately began to play its true role, absorbing all of the divine power in one go. The trembling ground also quickly returned to normal. The roots of the Tree of Chaos had already penetrated deep into the Earth's core. The countless huge roots firmly attached everything, including soil and rocks. Shock, confusion, fear. The newborn Earth god could not believe that even his power to control the Earth had been taken away. He was stunned for a moment. The dark goddess, Mao Sha, took the opportunity to quickly digest the chaos fruit. She felt the pulse that was closely connected to the entire world. It was as if she could trigger endless destructive power with a raise of her hand. After about a few minutes, she finally withdrew the darkness that shrouded the surroundings. She admired the appearance of the enemy with interest and took the initiative to speak. "I can feel the anger and anxiety in your heart. Tell me, Earth God, why are you angry and anxious?" "Why am I angry? Look at what you have done. Look at what you have twisted the earth under your feet. Darkness and chaos are spreading. It won't be long before they will permanently change the environment of the entire world. No, I will not allow that to happen." Ares waved his rock-hard arms and roared loudly. "So that's how it is." Mao Sha nodded thoughtfully. "You are the earth, representing the anger of this world towards the recent changes. But unfortunately, you have found the wrong target to vent your anger on. Believe me, I am not your enemy. On the contrary, we have a common enemy." "Who? Who is he?" Ares asked impatiently. "Do you see this twisted tree of chaos? He is the creator of this tree. He is the source of the chaos and darkness of the entire world. Come, let us work together to defeat him. Only then will the earth under our feet return to normal." "Name? Give me his name." "Sorry, I don't know his name, but I can take you to see him. Calm down and store up your anger. It won't be too late to explode when you see him." Chapter 1194. The forest was quiet at midnight, and not even the sound of insects could be heard. Only the magic spires standing tall on the flat ground flashed with multicolored halos from time to time. Although it looked so beautiful, anyone with a little understanding would know that this was the most dangerous place in the world, because there was an incomparably dangerous person living in the room on the top floor of the spire. Normally, even if a righteous person wanted to cause trouble, they would first have to pass through the various monsters hidden in the bushes and shrubs, as well as the powerful alchemy creations. But today, someone finally passed through the layers of blockades and arrived at the main entrance of the spire. Feeling the surrounding forest and earth being distorted by a powerful force, the earth god Ares forcibly suppressed the restlessness and anger in the depths of his heart. He gnashed his teeth and asked, "Is this his home?" "Home?" The dark goddess Musa lightly shook her head. Sorry, I don't know if a guy like that even has the concept of home. Believe me, he is a monster, a real monster, so we must be extra careful. No matter what kind of monster he is, today he must pay the price for his actions. Listen, the sound of the earth weeping. This world has had enough of his actions. The destruction and distortion must stop, and the chaos must be purified. After saying that, Ares swung his thick arms, jumped up, and smashed the hard walls of the spire. The next second, boom, countless magical defenses were instantly destroyed. Cracks appeared on the spire at an unbelievable speed. From afar, it looked like a spider web, and finally collapsed with a loud bang. Damn it, are you crazy? Musa stared dumbfounded at the pile of rubble on the ground, her mouth wide open. She couldn't believe that the other party had actually attacked without the slightest bit of hesitation or apprehension. Crazy? No, I'm not crazy. I'm just venting my anger on behalf of this world. Come out, blasphemer, I know you're not dead. The earth god Ares roared loudly at the collapsed ruins. Haha, blasphemer? Are you referring to me? The unharmed Zhang Cheng slowly walked out of the rubble with a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't care about what had just happened. That's right. It's you. Look at what you've done. This world is becoming more and more distorted under the influence of your power. It has already deviated from the original correct path. Ares, the god of earth, clenched his fists tightly and assumed a posture as if he could rush up and attack at any time. Unfortunately, his strength was not enough to pose much of a threat to a ruler. Zhang Cheng ignored the raging flames in her eyes and continued. You're the god of earth. To a certain extent, you've inherited a part of the will of this planet, so it's reasonable for you to be angry and hateful. Because my modification of this planet is irreversible, no matter what you do, you can't change the final result. At least, I can even kill you. The earth god Ares was like a berserker who had lost his mind. He rushed forward without saying a word, gathered all the divine power in his body, and raised his two arms to launch a violent attack. Boom, 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 boom. Almost every time, it would cause violent explosions and ground tremors. The mountain peaks in the distance would be affected to varying degrees. Some would cause landslides, and some would just collapse directly. Hundreds of tons of rocks would roll down the slope, and all the trees along the way would be razed to the ground. The place where the tower originally stood had now become a huge crater with a diameter of more than a few kilometers and a depth of 200 to 300 meters. This was the power of the god of earth. It was a power that mortals could never hope to contend against. But even under such a terrifying attack, Zhang Cheng was still unharmed. He stood in the same place without even moving half a step, allowing the arms with divine power to smash down again and again. All the impacts, regardless of whether they were caused by physical force or divine power, were blocked by an invisible barrier without exception. It was not a magical shield, but the strings of the material universe, also known as the dimension. He had integrated his body into the higher dimensional world and was directly immune to all forms of attacks. Admiring the twisted expression on his opponent's face, Zhang Cheng smiled and teased. Kill me? Are you sure you can do it? You don't even know where I am. You don't understand that in front of me, the so-called god is just a bug that can be crushed at will. Goodbye, wrath of the earth. The next time we meet, I'm afraid you'll be in a different state, the opposite of what you are now. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his arm, grabbed the ridiculously thick rock arm, and injected energy into it. In an instant, the majestic body of the god of earth, Ares, quickly turned into a puddle of gray mud as if it had been soaked in water. In less than a minute, it completely disintegrated. After doing all this, he turned his gaze to the dark goddess beside him. You want to use him to kill me? Should I say you're naive? Or should I say you're stupid? You actually killed him? Killed the wrath of this world? Mao Sha's pupils suddenly contracted. Why not? Zhang Cheng spread his hands indifferently. Let's not talk about the fact that this world has not condensed a complete independent consciousness. Even if it did, do you think I would care? Almost forgot. You seem to have swallowed the fruit of chaos. It won't be long before you completely understand what I mean. What do you mean? The dark goddess subconsciously frowned and asked. She could feel that a huge conspiracy was unfolding around her. The literal meaning: don't rush. Be patient. The truly interesting things have to be savored slowly. I don't want to miss the most interesting part. All right, go back. I won't do anything to you. You should know that you already belong to me. After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Pa! Accompanied by a crisp sound, the collapsed magic tower once again repaired itself at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, it returned to its original state. Even the surface of the tower was covered with the mud that the god of earth, Ares, had dropped after his death. There was no need to ask to know that the tower's defense had been upgraded and reinforced once again. At present, even if a god were to launch an attack, it would not be able to easily penetrate the mud that contained divine power and divinity. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1195. You already belong to me. Ever since she returned to the kingdom of darkness, Mao Sha had been pondering over the meaning of those words. As the chaos fruit was digested and absorbed, she could clearly feel that her connection with the entire world was becoming closer and closer. She no longer needed the faith of her believers and could still obtain an endless stream of power, incomparably powerful and endless. She even felt that it wouldn't be long before she would become one with the entire world and be able to change everything according to her will, including the 4 seasons and the changes in day and night. But for some reason, the more powerful she became, the more she could hear some indistinct murmurs. Although she couldn't quite understand what the murmurs were saying for the time being, her primitive instincts kept urging her to focus more on the tree of chaos. Every time she saw that towering tree, she would have a subconscious impulse, a strong desire to become one with it. Without a doubt, this was absolutely abnormal. No god would be willing to become one with a tree, even if it was a chaos tree that was connected to the core of a planet. As this obsession appeared more and more frequently in the depths of her mind, Mao Sha finally realized how serious the consequences of swallowing the fruit were. At the same time, she also understood the meaning of the words, "You already belong to me." That's right. Her spirit and soul were being eroded by islands, who had lost his independent consciousness. Her personality and way of thinking were gradually becoming more and more like him. In particular, her attachment to the tree of chaos was incomparable to any other emotion or desire. Damn it, I won't become anyone's thing. No, never. After another brief moment of absent-mindedness, Mao Sha's crazy roars reverberated in the sky above the kingdom of darkness, scaring those believers into hurriedly kneeling on the ground and loudly chanting praises and hymns in an attempt to appease the goddess' anger. Unfortunately, they didn't understand at all why the goddess was angry. At the same time, Zhang Cheng, who was in the room on the top floor of the rebuilt magic tower, looked at the images transmitted back from the mirror and couldn't help but smile and sigh. What a strong spirit of resistance. Unfortunately, it's useless. Some things can't be gotten rid of by sheer willpower or resistance. Your extremely beautiful dark soul will definitely become my most precious collection. Master, are you sure you want to let her find a way to break the spell? Isolt, who was standing nearby, asked cautiously. In his eyes, the best way to deal with such a dangerous dark goddess was to imprison her and slowly wear down her will until she completely submitted. Why not? You have to understand that sometimes it's quite interesting to watch the prey struggle for its life after falling into a trap. Believe me, it won't be long before she realizes in despair that there is nothing that can break the seed planted in her body. What is darkness? Was it pure evil and something that could not be seen? No, that was not true darkness. True darkness was when a person found out that the hope was an illusion and then fell into extreme despair. After repeated ingestion, a person would become as numb as a walking corpse. Only then can it be said to be truly shrouded in the depths of darkness. Zhang Cheng held his chin as he described his understanding of darkness. Isolt felt a chill run down his spine. He asked in an uncertain tone, "So, you want her to fall into despair?" Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "No, I only hope that she can get closer to the darkness and become a true dark goddess. Only in this way, when she becomes a weapon, will she be able to unleash her greatest power. Understood? Isolde looked as if he had understood, but not fully understood. Understood? No, you don't understand, and you will never understand. Forget it. Tell me what important news you brought back this time. Zhang Qing obviously did not want to continue talking about what true darkness was, so he decisively changed the topic. It's war, great master. Your agent has expanded her sphere of influence by at least 4 times. Not only did I bring back a large amount of battle data, but I also have a request from Vilya. Her army needs to be reorganized, and her internal affairs need some time to sort out. Otherwise, she will fall into endless rebellion. Isolde said all the things that needed to be reported without hesitation. There was no country that could expand without limit. Those empires with large territories in history actually had very weak control over their territories. Rather than an empire, it was more like a warlord alliance under the control of a powerful emperor. Once a powerful ruler died, the entire empire would quickly fall apart. The Alexandrian Empire, the Arab Empire, the Persian Empire, and the Mongol Empire on Earth were all military empires that seemed powerful on the surface but were quite weak internally. When their first ruler died, the entire country would either immediately fall apart, splitting into a few or even a dozen small countries, or quickly fall into internal chaos, becoming weaker and weaker until it was replaced by a successor. After all, the strength and stability of these countries were built on the personal ability and charm of the ruler, not on a stable system. Zhang Qing knew this, so he nodded casually. All right, let her do what she wants. Anyway, at this stage of the plan, her role is no longer essential. So, the change you've repeatedly mentioned is about to begin? Isolde suddenly raised his head, his eyes flashing with a strange light. Yes, the change is about to begin. Tell me, are you ready, my loyal servant? Zhang Qing asked with a half-smile. Of course. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Isolde hurriedly knelt on one knee, bowing deeply at the waist. His keen sixth sense was constantly warning him that if he showed even the slightest hesitation at this time, he would be doomed eternally. He knew very well how dark, cruel, and heartless his master's heart was. Very good, very good. Then, I'll now bestow upon you the seed of chaos. Feel it well, and let this seed take root and sprout. I guarantee that you'll get everything you want from it, including eternal life and becoming a god. Having said that, Zhang Qing reached out a finger and gently touched the old man's forehead. In the blink of an eye, Isolde felt something cold enter the depths of his mind. Chapter 1196. In a wilderness full of weeds and bushes, tens of thousands of soldiers were trying their best to kill each other. Although the war had been going on for more than 2 hours, corpses were everywhere, and dark red blood had dyed the whole river red, they still didn't collapse or stop. Especially the side wearing black armor, everyone was desperately shouting the name of the dark goddess. Even if they were dying, they would hug each other tightly and wait for their companions to come up from behind to kill them. Due to their heroic performance, although they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, they firmly occupied the initiative. They even forced the enemies who outnumbered them by 6-1 to retreat, as if they could start a large-scale rout at any time. Humph! It seems that my brother is only SOSO. His famous blood guards couldn't even defeat a group of recruits who had only been trained for less than 2 months. The queen, who was dressed in silver armor, raised her chin slightly, and a contemptuous smile appeared on her face. Since the Dark Church was regarded as the national religion, fanatical belief quickly swept everyone from top to bottom. As the army that had seen the goddess with their own eyes, they became the first batch of believers to be inspired. They were so crazy that they didn't fear death at all. They even dreamed that after dying in battle, they could go to the kingdom of the gods to enjoy a carefree life. With this group of fearless soldiers, the queen had successively defeated several brothers and sisters who had set up separatist regimes, killed their supporters, and included the land and population in her sphere of influence. As she got closer and closer to the capital, she began to suspect that she was actually a person favored by fate. Otherwise, how could she explain the sudden 180-degree reversal in her desperation? At present, no one dared to mention the matter of patricide in front of her. Instead, they kept advocating that she was the real heir of this great country. Your Majesty, the so-called elites are actually a comparison of discipline, courage, training, and equipment. Perhaps our soldiers are relatively poor in the latter too, but they are far superior to the other side in terms of discipline and courage. What's more, the great dark goddess will bless those devout believers, making them wield their weapons faster and more agile. At this speed, it won't be long before you can hold the coronation ceremony in the main hall of the palace. An old man wearing black armor, holding a mace and a shield, explained with a smile. Needless to say, this old man was the Archbishop of the church, a powerful priest whose body was filled with the divine power of darkness. The armor he was wearing and the weapon in his hand were not just for show. He was a ferocious man who could charge in front of his enemies and cut them down. After all, ever since the destruction of her church, the dark goddess Musa had sworn that she would never let such a situation happen again. That was why when she promoted priests, she chose warriors with decent combat power without exception. She no longer chose merchants with wealth or nobles with power, because the cruel reality made her understand that whether it was wealth or power, they were nothing in the face of a sword. I look forward to that day. In addition, I assure you that as long as I can regain control of this huge country, Dark Church will be the only legitimate religion. Every citizen from birth to death must go to the shrine at least once a month to pray devoutly. Queen, who had tasted the sweetness of the power of religion, instantly gave a promise. Even though she knew that as the power of the church continued to grow and infiltrate the various levels of society, sooner or later, a large part of their authority would be taken away. But a religion with the support of a true God was really too powerful. Just look at those soldiers who were immersed in killing. Even if their intestines were flowing out, they still didn't forget to slash the throats of their enemies with their short swords. If they were only trained in a normal way, perhaps even 5 to 10 years wouldn't be enough to train such elites. But now, she only needed the help of Dark Church to recruit some devout believers. Then, with the help of the believers' fanatical belief in the goddess, she would be able to obtain a group of fearless lunatics in about 2 months. Just as the Archbishop was about to say something to express his gratitude, he suddenly felt a blurry illusion appear before his eyes. In the illusion, a towering tree, towering into the clouds, was standing in front of him. It was unceasingly releasing some kind of astonishing energy. At the same time, the roots under the ground penetrated deep into the Earth's core, unceasingly extracting the energy of the entire world. No doubt, this was a warning. It was also a prophecy. He who had received many oracles immediately realized that this was a hint from the Dark Goddess. He had to set out as soon as possible to find this incomparably huge tree and then figure out what the goddess wanted him to do. Lord Archbishop, seeing that the old man didn't respond for a long time, the young queen immediately called out to him. I'm very sorry, Your Majesty. I was a little distracted. After all, I'm already an old man who is almost 60 years old, and I often lack energy." The Archbishop lied without batting an eyelid. For things like oracles, he wouldn't easily tell anyone, even if the other party was a chosen by the goddess or the ruler of a secular country. The queen obviously didn't realize that she had missed something. She smiled and nodded. "Of course, I completely understand. Also, I suggest that you don't wear such heavy armor, or else you'll lose your energy, especially quickly." Thank you for your considerate suggestion, but wearing armor is the will of the goddess. We must always be prepared for the worst. If you don't mind, can I go to the back and rest for a while?" Saying that, the Archbishop cast his gaze to the back, where the church knights were gathered in the forest. "Please." The queen very generously raised her arm and made an inviting gesture. Without saying anything, the Archbishop took off his helmet and quickly walked into the forest, waving his hand at one of the knight captains. The latter hurriedly put down the water bottle in his hand and quickly ran to the front, asking with a serious face, "Lord Archbishop, is there anything I can do for you?" "No, it's not me. It's the goddess who needs your strength now. Immediately recruit 20 people and search for a towering tree that reaches the clouds. Remember, at all costs." The old man gave the order directly. "Understood. In the name of the goddess, I promise to complete the mission." The knight captains patted his chest hard and quickly led his men away from the battlefield silently, sprinting towards the wasteland where the Tree of Chaos was. Chapter 1197. They climbed over mountains, crossed swamps, and advanced through the endless wilderness. When they were hungry, they ate some coarse rations. When they were thirsty, they drank some cold water. If they were lucky enough to meet an animal, they could even have a meal of barbecued meat or a bowl of steaming hot soup. These knights, who lived in the open, endured the unbearable hardships, and finally saw the majestic crown of the Tree of Chaos after 2 months. "Oh my goddess of darkness, there's really a giant tree here? How did it grow so tall? You should know that in my hometown, a tree can only grow to a maximum of 100 meters. When it rains, it will be struck by lightning and completely burned to ashes." A man who looked to be in his 30s subconsciously opened his mouth wide and exclaimed in shock, "Phew, looks like this is the place that the bishop mentioned. Get ready, we'll go in and investigate." The captain of the knights ordered as he drank the last drop of water in the flask and licked his dry lips. Due to the presence of the Tree of Chaos, there was no obvious surface water source within a few hundred kilometers. The streams, rivers, lakes, and springs that used to flow were all sucked dry. There was even a slight desertification at the edges. Many of the knights in this squad hadn't had a proper drink of water for several days. Whether it was their mouths or their throats, it was as if they were about to smoke. However, when they saw the Tree of Chaos, the surrounding environment took a 180-degree turn. Not only could they see all sorts of strange animals and plants, but there were also puddles on the giant leaves and roots. Some of the puddles were more than 1,000 meters in diameter, equivalent to a small pond or lake. There was no hesitation. The thirsty and hungry knights rushed to the bottom of the Tree of Chaos with their fastest speed. They couldn't wait to drink the slightly sweet water. Some even took out their bows and shot at the fat little animals. After just 1.5 hours, they picked up a bunch of dry branches that were full of oil and lit a bonfire next to a pond. They planned to enjoy a sumptuous meal in the wild. The translucent fish in the pond were so delicious that they almost swallowed their tongues. They didn't realize that danger had silently descended upon them. "Hey, Roman, did you hear any strange sounds?" A knight who was gnawing on a bone stopped what he was doing and asked with vigilance in his eyes. But it was a pity that the other knight, named him, didn't take it seriously. After swallowing the food in his mouth, he couldn't help but chide, "Don't be crazy. How could there be any movement? Didn't we search the surroundings just now? There aren't even any threatening beasts. Just eat your roasted meat in peace." "All right, maybe I'm being a little paranoid." The former shrugged his shoulders, opened his mouth, and tore off a piece of golden, tender steak with traces of blood in it. What the two of them did not know was that while they were talking, a few shadows holding primitive weapons were already lurking on top of the branches. Their eyes were glowing with green light as they watched everything that was happening below. There was no need to ask to know that these distorted and bizarre life forms that had begun to possess preliminary intelligence were the special species that had begun to evolve uncontrollably under the influence of the Tree of Chaos. To be precise, the few that came today were all monsters that liked to eat the brains of intelligent life forms. It wasn't clear if they needed a certain substance contained in the brains of intelligent life forms or if they just wanted to satisfy that soft taste. In short, even if they were within the range of the Tree of Chaos influence, they were still out-and-out outliers. They were feared, rejected, and hated by other species. Hunting was the instinct of carnivores. It was a killing instinct that was engraved in their genes. As long as a species hadn't permanently removed meat from its diet, this instinct would never disappear no matter how technology and society developed. It would only be temporarily hidden by the restraints of law and morality. Once the existing order collapsed or was stimulated by the outside world, the killing and hunting instinct would immediately awaken, and it would do many crazy things that ordinary people living in a peaceful environment would find unacceptable. Obviously, these monsters that liked to eat the brains of intelligent life forms were 100% meat-eaters. Although this was the first time they had encountered the largest number of indigenous inhabitants on this planet, they weren't afraid at all. After a simple confirmation of the number of prey, the leader raised the sharpened wooden spear in his hand and waved it at the other companions beside him. The latter understood tacitly and used their developed upper limbs to jump around on the branches. In just a short while, there was at least one monster above the head of every knight. Accustomed to fighting on a flat surface, they had undoubtedly forgotten that they were at the roots of a giant tree. They had completely neglected to confirm whether it was safe above their heads. The next second, all the monsters jumped down from high places and launched a surprise attack on their prey. Although the wooden spears were very crude and could not even pierce through the steel breastplates, too many of the knights did not have time to react before they were pounced on by these powerful monsters. Then they were smashed in the head by stones. With a bang, their heads were bleeding and they lost the ability to fight back. The monsters didn't hold back either. They used their hook-like fingers to pry open the wounds and greedily sucked the red and white brain matter in big mouthfuls. This primitive, barbaric, and cruel scene scared the knight Captain silly. He pulled out his sword and chopped off the head of the monster beside him. He roared furiously, "Die! Monsters! Quick! Those who can move, pick up your weapons. If you don't want to die. Sword! Give me the sword. Shield! I need a shield. Damn it! I need cover." A few lucky ones who survived the surprise attack immediately threw down the food in their hands and quickly formed a battle formation with their backs against each other. They cooperated with each other to resist the monsters that had the advantage in numbers. Fortunately, these brain-eating monsters didn't seem to want to fight head-on. After besieging for a while, they realized that they couldn't do anything to the other party. They quickly took the corpses, jumped up the branches, and disappeared into the dense foliage. Looking at the bloodstains on the ground, the knight captain suddenly shivered. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Great dark goddess, what kind of place have you led us to? What are those monsters? Demons?" Unfortunately, the goddess didn't give him a clear answer. She didn't even respond at all. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1198. There was no doubt that the sudden attack had pushed the already exhausted squad to the brink of despair and collapse, especially when they saw with their own eyes their comrades' skulls being ripped open and their brains being sucked dry. It was like a nightmare that kept enlarging in their minds. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't forget it. But as knights of the church with firm beliefs, they didn't forget their mission. After a short rest, they followed the captain's lead and began to follow the winding path connected by vines and leaves towards the top of the tree. They had to find out why the dark goddess sent them to such a dangerous and strange place before they were all killed. An independent environment formed by towering trees, a world completely different from the outside world. But soon, the intruders realized how ignorant and shallow their knowledge of this place was. When they were more than 300 meters away from the complex roots on the ground, the lush branches and vines mixed together to form umbrella-shaped platforms. The smaller ones were half the size of a football field, while the larger ones were as big as islands in the sea. Moreover, there were many strange creatures that had never been seen before living on each platform. Some of them even built simple houses and used primitive tools. Occasionally, they would even trade with each other. Everything indicated that this group of strange creatures actually had a considerable degree of intelligence and a minimal level of civilization. My God, where did these guys come from? Why haven't I heard of them before? A surviving knight of the church couldn't help but exclaim as he stared at the naked creatures covered in long gray hair in the distance. This was because they were gathered together like hardworking bees, erecting a wooden statue that was 3 meters tall. Even though the statue's appearance was rather abstract, and there was no way to tell what it was, the appearance of an object of worship meant that they were no longer satisfied with eating and drinking their fill like animals, fighting for the right to mate when they were in heat and doing everything they could to pass on their genes. Instead, they were pursuing spiritual satisfaction. Be careful. Don't disturb them. I'm not sure if they're the same as the monsters that attacked us before. The knight captain subconsciously tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, a strong sense of vigilance in his eyes. He couldn't help but be vigilant. He had already been attacked several times while he was 300 meters away from the ground. Giant insects and venomous snakes accounted for more than half of the attacks, and the rest were these strange, intelligent creatures. Don't worry, Captain. This should be different from the ones we've encountered before. Have you noticed the plants planted in the pond? Compared to those guys who hunt for a living, they have obviously learned how to farm and obtain food through planting. Another knight pointed at the row of purple-red fruits on the side of the platform. Just as he was speaking, there was another little guy who looked younger than him. He plucked a fruit from the shelf and stuffed it into his mouth, gulping it down. Needless to say, this unknown fruit was a stable source of food for this tribe. Farming? Damn it. This place was getting stranger and stranger. No matter what, we have to be careful. We can't have any more casualties. The captain grumbled as he climbed up a thick vine. The few members behind him followed closely. Although they were exhausted, they were eager to find a safe place to rest for a while, followed by a good night's sleep. However, the cruel reality forced them to keep moving forward. They did not dare to stay in one place for too long. This was because no one knew if they would have a chance to wake up after a good night's sleep. Just like that, the group climbed up the stairs formed by the Tree of Chaos without rest. When they were tired, they took turns to be on guard. They sat down and closed their eyes to take a nap for 1 or 2 hours. When they were hungry or thirsty, they simply ate something. Finally, after countless difficulties and obstacles, they reached the top of the tree where the air was thin and it was difficult to breathe. Due to the high altitude, the temperature was so low that it could freeze a person to death. Fortunately, the last 2 people to reach their destination had obtained enough warm clothes from their companions who had sacrificed themselves along the way. They were wrapped up like dumplings from head to toe. "Captain, look, what's that?" The knight who was lucky enough to survive shouted as he pointed at a black silhouette on the top of the tree. It had been more than half a month since they started climbing. This was the first time he saw a human silhouette. He could not help but be excited. "It looks like a human. Let's go. Let's go take a look." The knight captain wiped off the white frost on his eyebrows and his breath. He strode toward where Black Mirror was. In just 5 or 6 minutes, the 2 of them reached the only flat spot on the top of the tree. They were surprised to find that the other party was a woman who was covered in a black, translucent robe. Due to the veil, they could not see the woman's face clearly. However, the pair of eyes that were as dark as the night sky released a powerful aura. Goddess, are you the great goddess of darkness, Miosha?" The captain's voice was trembling and filled with disbelief. As a devout believer, he immediately recognized the woman who was similar to the statue in the temple. "Goddess of darkness, Miosha, is that my name?" The veiled woman's voice was filled with confusion. "Aren't you one?" Another knight stepped forward and asked. "No, I don't know. I don't remember anything. I don't even remember how I came to this place." The woman shook her head gently. Then, pain appeared on her face. The captain exchanged a look with his remaining subordinate. He quickly took out a sacred emblem and handed it to the woman. "Look at this. Maybe it can help you remember something." "This is—" The woman's eyes widened. She stared at the remnant aura on the sacred emblem. This aura was very familiar to her. It was as if it was a part of her body. "This is the sacred emblem of the goddess of darkness. It's our only faith," the captain introduced solemnly. Although he had not figured out what had happened, he vaguely realized that the woman in front of him, who seemed to have lost her memory, was the goddess of darkness that he served wholeheartedly. Chapter 1199. I'm your goddess? The woman frowned subconsciously, her voice revealing a strong sense of uncertainty. The captain hurriedly nodded. "That's right. You're the dark goddess, Musa." the only true God in this world. You're the spiritual sustenance of thousands of people. Because every believer had a close connection with the God they believed in. Unless the God deliberately hid their identity, the believers would quickly sense it if they appeared in front of them. Just now, he had secretly prayed and found that this woman had an invisible connection with him. Therefore, he could basically conclude that she was the dark goddess who had given the oracle. I'm sorry, I don't remember who I am or what I've done. Can you tell me about it? The woman asked curiously. Of course, it would be my pleasure. The captain knelt on one knee and bowed deeply, at the same time kissing the woman's silky, smooth black, translucent robe. Through the robe, he could clearly see that the goddess's skin was as white, smooth, and delicate as a baby's. She didn't seem to be affected by the cold wind at all. This kind of disregard for the harsh environment proved from another angle that the other party was definitely not an ordinary person. In order to understand the situation, he began to tell the woman everything he knew about the goddess, from beginning to end, completely ignoring his parched lips that were about to rot. When he reached the part about the oracle, a light flashed across the woman's eyes. She was no longer as muddle-headed as before. Instead, her eyes were filled with a strange light. She reached out her hand and said to the two knights, "Here, take it. The archbishop must have given you something important before he left, right?" Something? The captain showed a shocked expression. This was because when he set off, he did not receive anything from the archbishop. He did not even receive a single word of advice. But before he could open his mouth to deny it, the other paladin didn't say anything. He immediately pulled out a dagger that glinted with cold light and pierced the captain's heart from behind. Puff! In an instant, dazzling blood spurted out. In the extremely cold environment, it turned into red snowflakes that fluttered in the wind. What are you doing?" The captain struggled to turn his head, his eyes filled with shock. Even before he died, he couldn't believe that this good brother of his, who had fought side by side with him and gone through countless hardships, would actually give him a fatal blow at the last moment. "I'm sorry, Captain. You're the important item sent by the Archbishop. In order for the Dark Goddess to regain her consciousness, your sacrifice is necessary." As he spoke, the knight pulled out his dagger. A white soul was firmly attached to the dagger, and the expression on its face gradually changed from shock to calmness. Then it changed from calm to twisted and hateful. Without any hesitation, the knight immediately presented the soul filled with hatred with both hands and recited loudly, "The soul of the abomination." He was a devout believer when he was alive, but the moment he died, his faith collapsed, and he was filled with distorted power. This power will allow you to break free from control and regain your wisdom and rationality. Come, devour him, great goddess of darkness. Only then will you remember who you are. Devour? The woman grabbed the struggling soul and tossed it into her mouth. Accompanied by a painful scream, a familiar power suddenly emerged from the depths of his heart. Memories. Endless fragments of memories. They were so scattered and trivial, constantly flashing before her eyes like a slideshow, and countless information poured into her brain. Chaos. Disorder. Just by sorting out these complicated and trivial memories, the woman had to stand in place and lose her perception of the outside world for a full 4 hours. When she opened her eyes again, she found that the knight kneeling in front of her had been frozen to death, and only the silver-white soul was left standing guard in place. "Great goddess of darkness, have you returned?" The knight's soul asked excitedly. "Ah, that's right. I'm back. Thank you and your companions for your efforts. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid it wouldn't take long for me to be assimilated." Mao Sha slowly took off her veil, revealing a beautiful and mysterious face. With the corrosion and infiltration of the fruit of chaos, she realized that it wouldn't take long for her to lose her rationality. She decisively gave an oracle, and with the mentality of treating a dead horse as a living horse, she wanted to borrow the strength of the mortals to help her out of her predicament. After all, the strength of mortals was so weak that she wasn't even sure if this team could reach the crown of the Tree of Chaos. But the truth was that these mortals didn't disappoint her. and they completed their mission outstandingly. No, great goddess, to be able to serve you is the greatest honor in our lives. Please return to the kingdom of darkness. During your absence, I'm afraid the church has become a mess. With that, the knight bowed deeply and then disappeared without a trace. It was obvious that with the return of the goddess of darkness, all her believers would automatically go to the kingdom of darkness after death and be reborn in another form. Feeling the recovery of her divine power and hearing the thousands of prayers again, Mao Sha's lips curled up slightly, and she said in a voice that only she could hear, "The strength of mortals is indeed redeeming. Looks like I've won this time." As soon as she finished speaking, the space beside her was suddenly torn apart, and Zhang Cheng, who hadn't shown up for a long time, walked out unhurriedly. He smiled and teased, "I think I heard someone sleeping with her just now. She won? Isn't that so?" The goddess of darkness's pupils suddenly contracted, but she didn't back down even half a step. You definitely don't know what's happening to you, do you?" Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and smiled playfully. "What do you mean? Just like the literal meaning. Do you think the fruit of chaos only erodes your soul and consciousness? No, its real effect is to change your essence. The fruit of chaos has now become a part of your body and soul, and soon it will be all of you." The moment the last word left her mouth, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and gently tapped the goddess of darkness' forehead. Boom! Mao Sha only felt that there was something indescribable that exploded in the depths of her heart, constantly attacking the string called rationality. In less than a second, her rationality was completely destroyed. What replaced it was disorder, chaos, and madness. She didn't even know what she was doing, and there was only one thought left in her mind, and that was to vent without restraint. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1200. Huff, 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 huff. As her breathing became more and more rapid, Mao Sha's dark eyes began to show a faint light, and her body trembled uncontrollably. It was as if every cell and every nerve in her body was in a state of extreme excitement. In particular, her divinity and divine power were like a drop of water in a pot of oil, boiling at a rate visible to the naked eye. No rationality, no thinking. There's also no self-restraint unique to intelligent life. There was only chaos and a strong desire to vent. Looking at the dark goddess, who was like a wild beast in a frenzy, Zhang Cheng could not help but slightly raise the corners of his mouth and nod in satisfaction. Not bad. This is the result I was looking forward to, a divine soul that perfectly fuses the characteristics of darkness and chaos. Now it's time to end all of this and let you evolve into your final form. As soon as his voice fell, he did not hesitate to awaken the soul that belonged to islands hidden in Mao Sha's body. In less than a minute, the power of chaos had firmly gained the upper hand in this body, but did not affect the originally dark soul at all. Obviously, because Islands no longer had an independent consciousness, his soul and powerful spiritual power had become a powerful auxiliary ability that could almost infinitely increase the power of chaos, ensuring that it would always occupy a dominant position in the body. At the same time, Mao Sha's soul lost its ability to think normally under the influence of chaos, turning into a walking corpse that did not know what to do, and it was a walking corpse that was in an extremely excited state. However, this was only the beginning, and there was still a long way to go before it was complete. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng removed all the clothes on the other party's body, exposing the golden ratio body to the biting cold wind. He took out a special knife and slowly cut open the other party's chest, digging out the heart that contained God's blood. Then, he stuffed a piece of the tree of chaos into the other party's body. The next second, thump, thump, thump. That piece of dark red wood, like a real heart, began to beat violently in the bloody chest, and every beat brought about some kind of energy resonance. In addition, the skin of the dark goddess that was exposed to the air also began to slowly grow green shoots, and about 10 minutes later, they were tightly connected with the vines and branches on the crown of the tree. There was no need to ask to know that she was being assimilated by this powerful tree of chaos. And in the end, They were completely merged into one. Of course, this process couldn't be accomplished overnight. It would take a long time. Zhang Cheng smiled faintly as he admired the other party's body slowly sinking into the tree trunk. He muttered to himself, "Finally, the most crucial part of the plan was completed. The next thing I had to do was to wait patiently, wait for the two to merge into one, and then I would have a weapon that could kill anything. As for whether we should explore a completely different universe or teach those arrogant sovereigns a lesson, that will depend on the situation." Before he could finish his words, a face identical to Mao Sha's slowly appeared on the surface of the thick trunk of the Tree of Chaos. It suddenly opened its mouth and let out a low roar. After hearing this voice, all the living beings in the tree world immediately began to fight and kill each other as if they had gone mad. And this time, it wasn't for food, territory, or mating rights. It was purely for the sake of killing. Fresh blood, chaos, death. It was as if she was using this method to celebrate her birth, to announce to the entire world and even the entire universe that a weapon capable of killing sovereigns had appeared. Damn it, he actually succeeded. What do we do now? A sovereign of chaos stared fixedly at the terrifying power emanating from the giant tree and couldn't help but ask. Even though they were separated by more than half the universe, he could clearly sense that after the Tree of Chaos had obtained a soul, it was completely different from before. We don't have to do anything. Another sovereign of chaos shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. Don't forget that the power he uses is chaos and darkness. In terms of the nature of power, he's on our side. The ones who should be having a headache aren't us, but those fellows from the Order Council. But this weapon is a real threat to every single one of us. Perhaps Gru is right. He's a crazy genius, a monster who dares to break all shackles and advance to the peak. We have to think a way to stop him, or he might destroy all of us. The Sovereign of Chaos spoke with a strong sense of warning in his voice. So what? Don't tell me you intend to use force. If I were you, I wouldn't do that because the risk is too great. Who knows if you'll be able to return alive after a conflict breaks out? I don't think he's the kind of person who abides by the rules of battle. From his past, it's not difficult to conclude that once he thinks his opponent has crossed the line, he'll definitely kill them. No, I'm not that stupid. I think we should make use of the neutral sovereigns. Oh, looks like you have a plan, don't you? Of course. We just need to. Amidst the whispers, the sovereigns of chaos quickly came to an agreement and began to quietly carry out their plan. They had no idea that their every move was being seen clearly by Gru, who was hidden in the shadows. This sovereign with the appearance of a beetle didn't say a word and immediately appeared silently in the room on the top floor of the magic tower. At this moment, Zhang Cheng, who had nothing to do, was sitting on the balcony, drinking a drink ground from an unknown plant. He didn't even turn his head as he asked, "What brings you here?" "I just received a piece of news that I think you'll be interested in," Gru replied directly. "What news?" Zhang Cheng raised his cup and took a small sip of the scalding drink, his indifferent face expressionless. "A few of the sovereigns of chaos have already begun to view you as an enemy. They see you as a powerful threat and plan to plot a scheme to get rid of you or these powerful enemies." Gru didn't try to hide anything and openly revealed everything he knew. When Zhang Cheng heard this, he turned his head in surprise and said in a half-joking tone, "Does that mean we'll be enemies the next time we meet?" Gru smiled and shook his head. "No, you don't understand what I mean. This operation wasn't decided by a vote of everyone, but by a small group of people in private. Do you understand? I see. That means I can exercise my right to self-defense, right?" When he said this, a bone-chilling light flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes. Chapter 1201. Galu left, just like how he came in, without making sound. No one knew what he was thinking or what kind of considerations he had in mind. However, it was undeniable that this overlord who looked no different from an enlarged beetle was one of the few overlords who was willing to exchange information with Zhang Cheng and even discuss topics of interest. Most importantly, he had abandoned his former companions without hesitation and stood on Zhang Cheng's side in this conflict that could erupt. Gru's actions were rather strange, and could even be considered abnormal. As a very suspicious person, Zhang Cheng was rather sensitive and vigilant toward the word abnormal. He had always believed that one who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions, so he didn't believe that Gru was purely being nice. Gru definitely had some strong intentions toward him. It was just that such intentions had been concealed very well and hadn't been exposed for the time being. It was just like an ordinary daily life. Those who deliberately approached you, flattered you, and fawned over you were usually not good people. Some did it for the power and wealth in your hands, while others did it for the opportunity to vent their primitive desires. In short, Zhang Cheng had always been very ambiguous when it came to his attitude toward Gru. He didn't allow Gru to get too close, but he didn't reject him at 1,000 miles away. Simply put, he treated Gru as a channel to obtain information for free and did his best to maintain a safe distance between them. If he really discovered something one day, he would definitely fall out with Gru without hesitation. I don't care what tricks you're playing. As long as the Tree of Chaos is completely fused, no one will be able to threaten me on this planet. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised his head and gulped down the hot drink in one gulp. He silently savored the slightly bitter taste. However, before he could pour himself another cup, another uninvited guest suddenly appeared. Is that weapon of yours complete? The initiator didn't treat him as an outsider at all and directly barged in through the layers of magical defenses. That's right. It's probably complete, but I still need some time to get used to it. Why? You can't wait any longer. Zhang Cheng casually picked up a clean cup and poured a drink for the uninvited guest. Unfortunately, the initiator wasn't interested in the drink at all. He didn't even look at it and immediately nodded. Yes, look at this. I just received a message. He can't hold on much longer. If we don't move now, we might not even find his corpse. This is seeing the mysterious substance on the table that was constantly emitting a dazzling white light like a star. Zhang Cheng couldn't hide his astonishment. He couldn't help being astonished. Just like the strip-shaped object from before, this object was something that couldn't exist in the physical universe, or it was something that was condensed. The latter was purer than the former, as if it had been compressed by a powerful external force. Driven by curiosity, he reached out his hand. However, he didn't grab A's hands, didn't need to ask to know that this proved one thing. It could be seen but couldn't be touched. In other words, it didn't really exist in this world. Instead, it used some special method to let the life in this universe see its existence. Amazing, isn't it? Something that doesn't exist in the physical universe but can be seen. The initiator was undoubtedly very satisfied with his other self's astonishment. He used a piece of slightly tattered cloth to cover the light, then wrapped it up and stuffed it into his pocket. Zhang Cheng acutely sensed that the cloth was anything but ordinary. He couldn't help but ask, "What are you using? How can it wrap something that doesn't exist in the physical universe?" "It's nothing. It's a little toy that I found by chance. You could say that it's a relic left behind after the death of a ruler. Remember, this universe is much bigger than we think, and it hides even more secrets. If you want to discover them, you can't keep hiding in this remote corner. Moreover, isn't exploring the unknown and evolving towards a higher life form the strongest desire in your heart? Believe me, as long as we understand the connection between the spiritual universe and the physical universe, we'll definitely be able to break through the ceiling and become existences that surpass the ruler. When the spiritual and physical universe are completely connected, you and I will be able to complete the ultimate transcendence." When he said this, the initiator opened his arms slightly, as if he wanted to embrace the beautiful future. "I admit, your words have moved me. However, my answer is still that it's not the time yet. No one can mess up my plans and steps, not even you." Zhang Cheng's will was as firm as ever, and he would never change for anyone. To be precise, his cold heart had long been sealed, and he no longer accepted anything from the outside, whether it was warm emotions or impassioned encouragement. "Bastard, are you even listening to me? He's going to die. Do you understand? I can guarantee that in the entire universe, There's no one else who can decipher the secrets of the spiritual universe. He has to live, and he has to live in perfect condition. Realizing that his words didn't move Zhang Cheng, the initiator immediately became flustered and exasperated. However, Zhang Cheng didn't mind at all and retorted with a smile. What does that have to do with me? He's your friend, not mine. I won't take the risk for someone who might become the enemy's helper. I'm sorry, but you can't force me to do anything I don't want to do. So don't waste your energy. Either you go back and wait patiently, or you make the first move yourself. Perhaps when I'm done with all the preparations, I'll have time to collect your corpses. You'll regret this. The initiator was clearly a little angry, and his eyes were filled with resentment and anger. Regret? No, I've never regretted the choices I've made. Zhang Cheng shook his head meaningfully. On the contrary, I only laugh at those idiots who blindly listen to other people's bewitchment. Do you still remember how you dealt with your counterparts in the organization who came from different parallel universes? You lied to them, and then used them as nourishment to surpass your limits. From that moment on, there was no such thing as trust between us. I won't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. Good. Very good. I hope you can keep this thought until the end. Goodbye. After the initiator said those words, he turned around and left without hesitation. He knew that even if he stayed, it would be useless. The initiator had always known that the two of them would always be enemies until one of them was completely destroyed or swallowed by the other. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1202. At the center of the gigantic black hole, the Order Parliament had already transformed it into a fortification that connected countless galaxies and dimensions. It was a place that even the Dominators would dare to approach easily. A large number of terrifying weapons that made one shudder were like the quills of a hedgehog. They covered every inch of the black hole from the edges to the core, ensuring that any enemy that attempted to attack would suffer a saturation attack that was at least 10 million times stronger. Among them were materials and pure energy. As long as the other party was present, there was no way to escape, no matter what method was used. What was even more frightening was that other than the normal weapons, there were a few strange creations with strange shapes that emitted a dangerous aura. There was no need to ask to know that these were personally created by the Dominators. They were weapons that were specifically used to deal with fights between each other. Anyone who had seen their power with their own eyes would definitely not be willing to take a hit from them. It could be said that in order to ensure that this connection to the spiritual universe would not be used by the enemy, the Order Parliament had used almost all the resources and power under their control. However, just as they thought that their defense was absolutely foolproof, the initiator once again successfully avoided everyone's eyes and came to the only intact stone in the center. He smiled bitterly and muttered to himself, "Sorry, old friend. I'm afraid I won't be able to follow your request and bring him to another universe. Right now, the only thing I can do is to look for you. I believe that when he feels that the time is right, he will follow in our footsteps. After all, in essence, we are the same kind of people. We are lunatics who are willing to give up everything for unreachable ambitions and desires." As soon as he finished speaking, he took out the untouchable item wrapped in a rag and gently threw it onto the simple dissection table. In an instant, a dazzling white light illuminated the entire black hole. It wasn't just light. There was also matter and energy that were firmly bound by the black hole. It was like a volcanic eruption, directly splashing in all directions. Under this spectacular scene that resembled a small-scale Big Bang, all the defenses set up by the Order Parliament were ruthlessly destroyed and destroyed. Only a few lucky ones managed to escape. Before the Dominators could react to what had happened, the black hole that spanned across dozens of galaxies suddenly disappeared into thin air. Furthermore, the celestial bodies that were swallowed by the black hole, regardless of whether they were planets, stars, satellites, or asteroids floating in space, all returned to their original state in perfect condition. Everything was so unbelievable. It was as if the black hole from before was just an illusion. Damn it, who could tell me what happened? One of the sovereigns who had arrived first stared at the desolate planet that had been restored to its original state. His strange face revealed undisguised shock. Being swallowed by a black hole meant that when an object entered the event horizon of the black hole, the gravitational force between the 2 points closest to the singularity and farthest from it would be extremely large. Thus, the object would be unevenly stretched and eventually torn apart. In addition, the matter that entered the black hole would fall into the center of the black hole in a spiral path, so the matter would be stretched and twisted into a screw shape. After an object was torn apart, it turned into microscopic particles. These particles were then torn apart, and the protons and electrons in the atoms combined to form neutrons. Later on, the neutrons were also torn apart, and quarks came out. Finally, they were devoured by the singularity, leaving only mass, electric charge, and angular momentum. In the end, these substances would pass through something called strings and enter another parallel universe of the same dimension, but completely different. In other words, it was impossible for celestial bodies that had been swallowed by the black hole to return no matter what, because the matter and energy they contained had already been sent away. But now, this truth that was universally acknowledged by the sovereigns and countless advanced civilizations had been broken. What's going on? Why did this universe suddenly return to its original state? Also, where's that connection point? The second sovereign who had arrived could not help but look around with wide eyes. Unfortunately, for some reason, he couldn't even sense the obvious connection point from before. He must have been here. The third sovereign who had appeared immediately after picked up the rag that wrapped the untouchable object from the ground, his voice full of hatred. Him? That traitor? No, he's not a traitor. From the moment he joined us, he was intensely deceptive. What do we do? Continue to hunt him down? This guy seems to be very good at hiding himself. It won't be easy to find him in this vast universe. No, there's no need to look for him. He's no longer in this universe. What do you mean? Idiot. Have you forgotten what happened to this star field the last time he opened a passage to another universe with his companions? Think about what happened just now, and you'll understand where that guy went. Oh, this lunatic. He actually... That's right. He abandoned everything in this material universe, which is why this star field returned to its original state. From matter to spirit, it's actually a kind of exchange. A long time ago, several talented sovereigns did in-depth research, and 2 of them made the same choice. Unfortunately, they never made it back alive. So he's dead for sure? I don't know. We don't even know what the other side is like. Perhaps they have a completely different form, living in a universe completely constructed by spirit. Just as the sovereigns of the Order Parliament were having a heated discussion, the initiator had already safely passed through the passage and stood in a white world in his pure spirit form. There were no animals, no plants. There was no earth or sky. There was only a white plain that stretched as far as the eye could see. However, when his thoughts began to spread out, the entire world suddenly underwent a wonderful change. First, there was color. All kinds of bright and beautiful colors filled the entire field of vision in just a few seconds. Green plants, colorful flowers, birds with bright feathers, and the clear water of the creek. Without a doubt, in this world completely constructed by spirit, the strength of one's spirit was directly reflected in the surrounding environment. Through the fusion of imagination and spirit power, the initiator could create anything he wanted to see and even revive someone in his mind. Unbelievable. This universe is filled with endless possibilities. He squinted his eyes and praised in a voice that only he could hear. Chapter 1203. What was mind? Some people said that it was a very abstract thing that could neither be seen nor touched, but it was constantly affecting everything around it. Some people believed that it was a powerful and special energy that could even distort reality when necessary, completely overturning phenomena that were regarded as common sense and truth. But regrettably, all of these conclusions were, without exception, based on observations and tests in the physical universe, not in this universe that was completely controlled by the mind. The initiator who had just arrived had already sensed countless secrets that could never be discovered in the physical universe, as well as a series of manifestations that were completely opposite to the laws of nature. Here, thoughts and self-consciousness were infinitely magnified, as if he was the entire world. Once the consciousness produced by the initiator disappeared, the bright colors and beautiful scenery would completely disappear, returning to the original white plane. Just as he was continuously testing the extent of his mind's influence, a large, strange stone forest suddenly appeared on the white plane in the distance. Below the stone forest was a dark green pool that kept bubbling. Before he could react, a strange creature that looked like a snake or an earthworm slowly swam toward him along the dark green pool. It looked to be about 40 meters long, and its gray skin was covered with inverted scales that looked like barbs. Whether it was its head or tail, there were no organs such as eyes that could be used to observe the outside world. Instead, its head was filled with mouths full of sharp teeth of various sizes. Every time it opened its mouth, it sent chills down one's spine. It was as if one would be torn into countless pieces if one was bitten. The initiator had no doubt discovered the existence of the other party, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. This was because when the boundaries of the two people's minds collided, a signal was sent out at the same time, a signal used to distinguish between friend and foe, and to test the strength of the other party. The next second, the huge monster suddenly opened its mouth and rushed over at an unbelievable speed. Then it jumped up, curled up into a ball, and smashed down fiercely. Out of caution, the initiator did not take it head-on. Without a word, he escaped the range of the impact. But what he did not expect was that the moment the curled-up monster hit the ground, it released an astonishing amount of mental energy, directly smashing the beautiful world he had built into smithereens. At the same time, it began to bite and devour everything that remained in the surroundings. Every time it swallowed a mouthful, the initiator would feel a sharp pain, as if something very important was leaving it. When he realized this, his face immediately changed, and he cursed in a low voice, "Damn it! It's actually robbing my spirit?" There was no doubt that in the universe of spirit was the foundation of everything. It was not only food, but also energy and material. It was the nourishment that the life forms living here had to obtain. Without any hesitation, the initiator immediately tried to use the power of the mind to fight back. First, he created an interstellar battleship's main cannon out of thin air, trying to use the powerful antimatter weapon to deal a fatal blow to the monster. However, the interesting thing was that even though the main cannon had been created, there was no way for it to fire. Needless to say, the basic rules of the two worlds were completely different, not to mention the advanced scientific knowledge in the material universe. Helplessly, he tried to create magic, but he found that although magic could be created, its power was unbelievably weakened, and some even had a completely different effect from the original. In the end, he had no choice but to create a cold weapon and start a hand-to-hand fight with the unknown monster. Although he had not mastered the method of using the mind to fight, the monster did not have high intelligence and was only attacking based on its primitive instincts. After a short period of experimentation, the initiator quickly understood the enemy's ability and at the same time came up with a corresponding countermeasure. After a short while, he used the ordinary-looking giant sword in his hand to cut open the scales from the side and stab into it. Bang! What followed was an explosion. It was hard to tell if this monster was a snake or some kind of special worm. Finally, a large amount of dark green liquid burst out from its body. Following that, the environment it affected gradually disappeared, and finally, it returned to the white surface that stretched as far as the eye could see. Killing and plundering? Is this the way to obtain the power of the mind? The initiator felt the huge amount of mind energy that was constantly gathering toward him, and a hint of joy appeared in his eyes. This was because the moment the monster died, his mind energy rapidly grew. Not only did it make up for the consumption of the test, but it also grew more than twice as big. Apart from that, he also realized that every living thing in the spiritual world would build an environment that they were familiar with and use it as their home ground to fight. When two living beings fought, their home ground would collide. The weaker one's home ground would be destroyed and devoured, while the stronger one could use its home ground advantage to attack in some unimaginable ways. For example, the jump just now. Under normal circumstances, a creature with such a shocking weight and no legs or wings would not be able to jump so high. However, with the mental energy that was added to its home ground, the giant monster easily jumped more than 50 meters. If it had not reacted quickly enough, it would have been smashed into a pulp. When the last trace of mental energy in the surroundings was washed away, the initiator took a deep breath and looked at the endless white plain. He touched his chin and muttered softly, "Then, where should I go to find you now, dear old friend? I don't want to run around in this dangerous place." Before he could finish his sentence, a large patch of thorns suddenly grew out of the white world around him. At the same time, countless creatures of all kinds were fleeing in all directions at an unbelievable speed, as if there was a natural enemy chasing after them. Boom, boom, boom. For some reason, the ground trembled slightly, and there was a deafening sound. Just as he was trying to figure out what was going on, a gray figure suddenly jumped out from the corner and pulled him behind a huge thorny vine. He lowered his voice and warned him, "Put away the environment you created. Shut up. Don't do anything. Don't even try to spy on it. Otherwise, I promise you'll die without a burial place." The initiator turned his head subconsciously and finally saw the familiar face of his old friend. Chapter 1204. It's you? You're still alive. Although his mouth was gagged, the initiator still communicated with his old friend through his mind, trying to figure out the current situation. To be precise, he wanted to obtain a large amount of information about the rules of this world in the shortest amount of time possible, as well as the things he needed to pay attention to. Unfortunately, the other party was obviously very nervous. Not only did he not answer any questions, but he also sternly warned, "Shut up. Don't you understand what I'm saying? This is a spiritual universe. It doesn't matter if you make a sound or directly communicate through your mind. For the life of this world, it's no different from directly revealing your existence." As soon as he finished speaking, a flying creature with an extremely adorable appearance appeared in the distant sky. Its entire body was pink and oval, and it looked a little fleshy. Its body was covered with a layer of fine fluff, and its two big eyes were blinking. However, it did not have any upper limbs such as wings for flight. Needless to say, its flying ability came from its powerful mind, not the aerodynamics of the physical universe. In other words, the boundless economic vines around it were a home field created by its terrifying mind power, a world in the truest sense. Any creature shrouded in this world would lose their home field and even become a lamb at the mercy of others. Fortunately, this cute creature did not seem to have much desire to hunt at the moment. It circled around the area twice before continuing to move in another direction. No one knew how much time had passed. Maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe it was a few hours. Anyway, after it disappeared for a long time, the boundless economic vines finally disappeared. Seeing this scene, the man wearing glasses finally let out a long sigh of relief. He slumped to the ground without caring about his image. He smiled bitterly and mocked himself. "Not bad. At least I survived without any danger. I bet you can't even begin to imagine how I've been through all this time." It can be said that every minute and every second was a race against death. If the process was even a little bit lax, my mind and soul would disappear forever. The danger you're referring to, don't tell me you're referring to that cute little thing just now? The initiator raised his eyebrows subconsciously. He could not believe that such a little thing could pose a threat to him. "No, you don't understand at all. The most interesting and dangerous part of the spiritual world was that you couldn't judge a creature's strength by its appearance. Do you still remember that endless forest of thorns? Think about it. How much mental power must be consumed to create and maintain such a large environment at all times? Then you'll understand how terrifying that little thing is. You know, that's not the most amazing thing I've ever seen." The bespectacled man obviously hadn't found someone to communicate with for a long time. He was eager to share his experience and insights with his old friend. Unfortunately, the initiator didn't have the time or interest to listen to this. He immediately interrupted. "Wait, We'll talk about this world later. Now, tell me, how can we return safely? Return? The man frowned. Why do you want to return? No, I'm not going back. I still haven't figured out the connection between mind and matter. Before I can figure out this topic, I will die here even if I have to. Are you crazy? Do you keep sending me messages so that I can accompany you on this adventure? The initiator grabbed the man's collar without hesitation. He knew better than anyone else how crazy his old friend was when it came to the research he was interested in. Back then, due to the lack of experimental materials, he used his wife, children, and even himself for some extremely dangerous genetic experiments. Cold, emotionless. He never saw any other life as his own kind. The reason why the two of them could be together was because of the similarities in their thinking and consciousness. The man shrugged nonchalantly. That's right. Why else do you think I called you here? Do you know? As long as we figure out the secrets of the spiritual world, we'll know how it affects the material universe. It might even break the boundary between the two universes and transcend matter and spirit. Think about it. When you have the support of both, who will be your opponent? Also, I think I asked you to invite that guy. Didn't he come? He refused. When the initiator said this, his eyes shone with a strange light. It was obvious that he was tempted. He had already seen how terrifying the spiritual world was and understood how terrifying it would be if this power could be used in the material universe. Enemies wouldn't even have a chance to fight back. As long as they were at a disadvantage in a spiritual battle, all attacks and defenses would be useless. This was a power that could distort reality and distort the laws. It wasn't like other powers that had a limit. Refused? Why would he refuse? That can't be. He should be like you and me. Crazy people who will do anything to achieve their ambitions and desires. The man muttered to himself with a gloomy expression. No, I think you misunderstood me. It's not that he refuses to take the risk. He just doesn't think the time is right. Do you still remember the tree of chaos he cultivated? Just a few days ago, he almost completed the last step. In front of this weapon, sovereigns are no longer immortal. Their abilities will be stripped away, stolen, and sealed away. Anyone who had experienced the power of the Tree of Chaos would definitely not want to provoke its creator. The initiator actually took a huge risk when he went to the Magic Tower to meet Zhang Cheng for the last time. He himself wasn't sure if his other self would suddenly turn hostile, strip him of his power, and then forcefully devour his soul so that the two of them would eventually merge into one. That weapon is complete. Tell me, what did he use as the core of the Tree of Chaos? The eyes of the bespectacled man shone slightly, and he showed an expression of interest. It's a god, a dark goddess who was cultivated from a mortal and is a perfect match for him. As an amplifier, I have to admit that this is a perfect choice. It won't be long before he starts looking for a way to enter this place. So you must be worried that when he returns, there's nothing that can stop a guy like him from pursuing the possibility of surpassing the limits. Chapter 1205. While the initiator was reuniting with his old friend, Zhang Cheng was meeting an emissary on a remote planet. To be precise, it was a ruler from the neutral faction. This green humanoid with obvious female features stood elegantly in the center of the hall. She took the initiative to bow very elegantly, then said unhurriedly, "Greetings, young Chaos ruler. My name is Come On, and I represent all the rulers of the neutral faction. I hope to have a face-to-face talk with you." "Oh, what do you want to talk about?" Zhang Cheng held his chin with one hand, a hint of playfulness in his eyes. He had already received Gru's warning that a small group of people from the Chaos faction were trying to cause trouble for him. This was because they feared the power of the Tree of Chaos, and because he was growing stronger day by day, even surpassing the speed of those old rulers. Just as the saying went, immortality was sometimes not a blessing, but a terrifying curse. In the face of endless time, most life forms would inevitably become lazy, and they would prefer to slow down their fast pace of life. After all, they had time. If they didn't do it today, they could do it tomorrow. If they didn't do it tomorrow, they could do it the day after. Waiting a day or two was essentially no different from waiting a few thousand years. When they started to get used to this slow reaction speed, their growth in strength would stagnate. Therefore, there was a common phenomenon among rulers. The longer they were rulers, the less they liked to research and explore new things. Instead, they liked to play small games to pass the time. Some would even disguise themselves as members of other civilizations and join their societies to experience completely different cultures. They would even have intimate and emotional interactions with creatures of a lower level than themselves. In comparison, ever since Zhang Cheng surpassed his limits, even though he still recognized his identity as a human, he no longer thought of those ordinary people as his own kind. He also didn't contact his former girlfriend. He used an almost extreme method to completely cut off all ties with the past. He didn't have any attachments at all. Let's talk about the effects that the Tree of Chaos has on this planet. I believe you know that our goal is to maintain the balance of the universe. We don't let it fall into the control of absolute order, and we don't let chaos devour everything. However, your actions have directly broken this balance. We hope that you can destroy your own creation and guarantee that you won't create a second one. The female sovereign didn't beat around the bush and directly stated her intentions. You want me to personally destroy my most perfect creation? Are you sure you're not joking? Zhang Cheng pursed his lips, revealing a dangerous smile. He could not believe that the other party had the guts to make such a rude and arrogant request in front of him. Did they really think that he wouldn't dare to kill a ruler? If that was the case, then one of the leaders of the neutral faction would disappear from this planet forever. The female ruler clearly sensed the undisguised malice and shook her head with a grave expression. No, of course I'm not joking. Perhaps the weapon you created is very powerful, but don't forget that your enemies are not just us. What's more, we're willing to compensate you. I sincerely suggest that you consider it carefully. The neutral faction is not order, nor is it chaos. We are not keen on fighting or destroying anything. We just want the universe to remain the way it was, that's all. I'm sorry, Mayam. Even though it's rude to say this, I still have to say it. Please don't be wishful thinking. It doesn't matter if it's you or those rats hiding in the dark. They're nothing in my eyes. If you want to start a war, then come. I'll be more than happy to make the entire neutral faction disappear from the universe. Perhaps you don't know much about my past, but I can tell you that I'm someone who loves war, slaughter, destruction, and destruction. Nothing makes me happier than hearing the screams, curses, and curses of my enemies before they die. Zhang Cheng coldly smiled to express his attitude. The boiling power in his body directly changed the surrounding environment and even blocked out the light from the stars, causing the entire planet to sink into darkness and chaos. This is your answer? The female sovereign carefully probed. Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. That's right. That's the answer I gave you. All right. I express my regret. Please remember that war is not what we want, but sometimes only war is the ultimate solution to all conflicts. After saying that, the female sovereign stood up and bowed again. Then she turned around and tore open a spatial crack to pass through. Watching the other party's disappearing figure, Zhang Cheng immediately mocked with a smile. Empty threats and intimidation? Or do you really have the courage to fight with me, even if a sovereign dies? Today, let me see if these sovereigns are like those mortals, fearing death more the longer they live. If they don't even have the courage to fight to the death, then it'll be too disappointing. As the last word left his mouth, he dispelled the darkness that shrouded the surface of the planet, returning everything to normal. As for the ordinary people living on this planet, they immediately burst into unprecedented cheers. Some ignorant fellows even knelt on the ground and loudly prayed to the dark goddess who had already lost herself, loudly reciting poems praising the goddess from ancient books. This was because in their eyes, the boundless darkness just now was the best proof that the powerful goddess had performed a miracle. However, Zhang Cheng did not have the time to pay attention to these ordinary people. Instead, he left the tower and went directly below the Tree of Chaos. He gently stroked the gradually disappearing face on the tree trunk and said with a smile that was not a smile, "It's time to show your true power and give those restless fellows a warning, isn't it?" Boom! Instantly, This giant tree released a powerful energy shock, directly squeezing all the planets, satellites, and meteorites in the entire system, except for itself and the stars, into tiny particles. It was obvious that he was using this method to declare war on those sovereigns hiding in the dark. Just as the female sovereign had mentioned, only war, and only war was the ultimate solution to all conflicts. When the opponent's body and soul were destroyed, the so-called conflict would naturally cease to exist. All compromises and negotiations were based on the acknowledgement of both sides' strength. At the very least, they had the ability to cause great trouble and casualties to the other side. Now, it was time for Zhang Cheng to prove his true power. This was also why he insisted on staying and not following the initiators to explore the spiritual world. Chapter 1206. The neutral ring was a ring built around a special neutron star. From a distance, half of the ring seemed to have fallen into eternal darkness, while the other half was enveloped in the light of the neutron star. Without a doubt, this was the main camp of the neutral faction sovereigns, a place known as the perfect fusion of order and chaos. However, at this moment, this place that should have been filled with peace and tranquility was filled with an aura of tension. Massive armies could be seen everywhere. One had to know that the sovereigns of the neutral faction were all rather gentle people. They rarely took the initiative to start a war, much less recruit subordinates for no reason. Any large-scale operation like this would inevitably lead to a series of unforeseen consequences. In a flash, countless pairs of eyes turned toward the neutral ring. How was it? What was his answer? In the core region of the neutral ring, 9 sovereigns of the neutral faction were gathered together, waiting for an answer from the emissary who had just rushed back from the other side of the universe. My apologies, his answer was a refusal. He even took the initiative to invite us to war. The female sovereign sighed, as though she were regretting the impending war. He took the initiative to invite us to war? Is he crazy? Or is it because of that weapon that he thinks he has the power to contend against all of us? Another sovereign slammed the table restlessly. All the sovereigns present believed that such a powerful weapon had to have a corresponding drawback. There was no way it could be used to suppress the entire neutral faction. At most, it would be able to deal with 3 to 5 of them at once. However, before the Tree of Chaos was complete, it had already stripped a sovereign of 90% of his power. No one wanted to be the next victim. Just as the scene fell into silence, a faint red silhouette suddenly appeared in the darkness and mocked in a slightly sarcastic tone. "Are you afraid? I can't believe that a bunch of fellows who claim to protect the balance of the universe are actually afraid of a brat who hasn't been a sovereign for long." "Shut up. Who are you two but in on our matters?" The female sovereign's eyes were filled with undisguised disgust. She would never forget that it was this fellow who had purposely brought news to push the neutral ring, which had never liked to resort to violence, to the brink of war. "Ha ha, I have no interest in your matters. But don't forget, this matter is not only related to you, but also to us. Anyone who violates the taboo should be punished mercilessly, instead of allowing them to grow and eventually threaten all of us." The red silhouette retorted with a laugh. "This guy is right. He did threaten the great balance. In any case, we can't wait any longer, especially since he has invited us to war. We have to respond, otherwise there's no need for the neutral ring to exist." No matter what the original intention of an organization was, whether it was good or evil, selfless or selfish, it was impossible for any organization to ignore the provocation to itself. This was especially true for a powerful organization like the Neutral Ring that controlled a third of the material universe. Although they didn't like to fight, it didn't mean that they were weak. On the contrary, perhaps compared to Order and Chaos, who were passionate about changing the status quo, their reputations were far less resounding. However, to be able to make both of them fearful was definitely not something that could be done just by being peace-loving. But don't forget, not long ago, they even tried to join forces with the Order Council to wipe us all out. The female master was clearly unwilling to be used by the other side, and she did her best to prevent the war from erupting. Regrettably, However, those who held such thoughts were in the minority. In the end, after a vote, two-thirds of the members agreed to start the war with the destruction of the Chaos Tree as the prerequisite. As for the Red Silhouette, it expressed its willingness to delay the other masters of the Chaos faction and ensure that those who violated the taboo received their due punishment. Just like that, the two sides reached a cooperation agreement, and the entire neutral ring began to operate rapidly. In the blink of an eye, a stable spatial tunnel large enough to allow an interstellar fleet to pass through was completed. The entire ring, including the neutron star, passed through and appeared beside a remote planet. Such an undisguised, large-scale invasion naturally couldn't escape Zhang Cheng's eyes. The moment the neutral ring was completely cleared, he delivered his first gift. In just a few short seconds, the top of the Chaos Tree released a beam of chaotic energy, which pierced through the neutron star at the center of the ring. The next second, the neutron star seemed to have been stimulated by something, constantly releasing terrifying and lethal rays into the outside world. At the same time, it caused gravity to collapse and explode. Before most people could react to what had happened, the entire ring of order had been torn into pieces. Apart from the masters and a few powerful war machines, there weren't many survivors left. Seeing the shocking number of casualties he had caused, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but purse his lips and sneer. "How is it? My welcoming ceremony wasn't bad, was it? Don't be in such a rush. The truly exciting part is yet to come. Don't shrink back. Just like before, I'll use slaughter and death to instill fear in everyone's hearts." As soon as he said that, the little bug that Gru had left behind suddenly exploded with a bang. In the silver light that filled the sky, Gru's image appeared. "You've started a war with those fellows from the neutral ring?" "Oh, that's right. Look at this beautiful scenery. How enchanting. I can't get enough of it no matter how many times I look at it. I really hope this universe isn't a vacuum. That way, I'll be able to see their panicked expressions and hear their exasperated curses. I might even be able to hear their anguished cries before they die." As he said this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flickered with a cold, cruel, and crazy light. "Damn it, you have to hold on. I'll summon reinforcements immediately." Gru was clearly stunned by the scene in the mirror. He immediately realized that no matter how much those fellows from the neutral ring disliked violence, they were definitely enraged. This could no longer be called a provocation. It was a clear signal of war, a battle to the death. However, Zhang Cheng shook his head indifferently. "Reinforcements? No, I don't need reinforcements. What I need is an audience. Next, you'll see the greatest number of deaths since the formation of this universe. Remember, this is a true death from the soul to the body." Chapter 1207. "Bastard! How dare he? That guy's crazy. No. Think back to that attack. He can actually convert the primal chaos into a type of energy. That's the most shocking part. What do? Do we still have to take the risk and approach? I don't want to be hit by that thing." The sovereigns of the neutral faction were shocked out of their wits, and some of them even showed signs of retreating. That was because they weren't sure if this terrifying attack was a one-time thing or if it could be fired continuously. If it was the latter, it was best to give up as soon as possible. Even though the distance of the beam was extremely short, it was more than enough as a defensive weapon. Unless some sovereigns with special methods were willing to reveal their trump cards, they wouldn't be able to approach through conventional means. But the problem was, who would be willing to reveal their trump cards at a time like this? After all, with this place becoming a battlefield, there were bound to be countless pairs of eyes watching their every move. This was especially true for the Order Parliament and the Chaos faction, who had just reached an agreement to destroy the neutral ring. Although it had been aborted before it could be put into action, the hostility and estrangement it had created wouldn't disappear so easily. Trust was something that was difficult to establish and easy to destroy. When the last shred of trust was gone, it was only natural that they would become true enemies. In the end, after much discussion, the sovereigns of the neutral faction decided to try tearing through space and descending on the planet's surface. Needless to say, they were betting that Zhang Cheng would not destroy the extremely important planet under their feet. After all, the Tree of Chaos relied on absorbing energy from the planet's core until it swallowed the planet and replaced it. Unbelievable. This is the Tree of Chaos? The sovereigns who had descended first couldn't help but cry out in surprise as they gazed at the massive object that had almost broken through the atmosphere and connected to outer space. Compared to observing from a distance in the endless depths of space, this kind of close-up appreciation undoubtedly produced an intense shock. That's right. This is the Tree of Chaos. No matter what, the person who created it is a genius, isn't he? The female sovereign appeared next to him, her voice filled with emotion. As the only person present who had spoken with Zhang Cheng, she knew better than anyone the crazy ambition hidden beneath his calm exterior. Never retreat, never yield, an insatiable desire. I admit it, he's a genius. However, this was not a reason for him to violate taboos and threaten the balance and cycle of the universe. The Tree of Chaos must be destroyed, no matter the cost. As he spoke, the sovereign began to gather his power in an attempt to tear the gigantic plant apart. But at this critical moment, Zhang Cheng, who had been staying in the magic tower all this time, finally appeared. He wore a long black robe and held a black circular rune in one hand. He greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, rulers of the neutral ring. I am very honored that you can come to my territory and provide the necessary nourishment for the growth of the Tree of Chaos. Do you know? It's very thirsty right now, very thirsty. Only by devouring the blood and soul of the sovereign can it be satisfied. You want to kill us?" The hegemon who had spoken first sensed the undisguised killing intent, and his face instantly fell. He wasn't the only one. The other 9 sovereigns all had different reactions. Some were shocked because they couldn't believe that there was such an arrogant guy in the universe who wanted to kill an entire faction by himself. Others were furious, feeling that they had been underestimated. They rubbed their palms together, ready to teach the other party a lesson that would leave a deep impression. There were also some whose eyes flashed with vigilance. Anyone who dared to speak so viciously had to have something to rely on. Hell, why not? Isn't war about killing one another to eliminate the enemy's body and soul? Isn't that the point of war? Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and greedily licked them. As the master of the Tree of Chaos, he could already sense the intense desire transmitted from this fellow through their spiritual connection. There was no doubt that these sovereigns were the most delicious food to the Tree of Chaos. You're very dangerous, just like another you, be it your actions or your thoughts. This is your last warning. It's not too late to give up. The female sovereign made a final effort. Thank you for your kind intentions, but I'd still rather choose war. I'd rather do a soul-stirring challenge. Come, let me see what's so special about the neutral ring, one of the 3 most powerful factions in the material universe. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng immediately fused with the Tree of Chaos, and vines shot out from it, covering the juggernauts within. One had to know that these weren't ordinary vines, but binding vines imbued with the power of darkness and chaos. Even sovereigns would find it difficult to break free if they were careless. You'll regret your choice. I guarantee it. The female sovereign dodged hundreds of vines in an instant, swinging her left arm to cut them all in 2. Perhaps the prerequisite is that you can defeat or kill me. All right, let's not talk so much nonsense. Let's use our strength to prove who's right. Zhang Cheng didn't show the slightest bit of disappointment or panic at the sight of hundreds of vines being cut apart. Instead, he continued to control the remaining vines. Before long, one of the weaker sovereigns was the first to be tied up like a cocoon on a spider's web. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he struggled. At the same time, the connection between his body and the bowstring was being stripped away. He grew weaker and weaker until he finally stopped struggling and called for help from his companions. Regrettably, most of the sovereigns couldn't even take care of themselves. The creator and owner of the giant tree were standing to the side, unable to lend a helping hand. No, I won't let you have your way. Bloom, the light of balance from the birth of the universe. Just as Zhang Cheng thought that this sovereign was done for, he suddenly shouted out an inexplicable sentence. Instantly, an enormous wave of energy surged out from his body. Every one of them was like the sharpest dagger, easily cutting through those incomparably tough vines. At the same time, they also cut open a huge crack that was more than 30 meters deep on the trunk of the Tree of Chaos. Countless amounts of blood-red liquid flowed out continuously like blood. Chapter 1208. This is... Sensing the flash of light, Zhang Qing's expression was unprecedentedly serious. After all, the Tree of Chaos itself was a huge energy storage. No matter what form of energy it took, it would be quickly absorbed and stored. Unless the level and form of this energy far exceeded the upper limit he had designed. Thinking of this, Zhang Qing immediately turned his gaze to the Juggernaut who had just broken free from the vines. For some reason, the Juggernaut's body had become extremely unstable. Whether it was his body or his internal soul, it seemed like he could collapse at any time. Damn it! Are you crazy? You're using such a dangerous thing here. You might get all of us killed. Another Juggernaut quickly came to the side and put some kind of device on the Juggernaut's hand. After about 2 to 3 minutes, the unstable tremors slowly calmed down. At the same time, the chilling aura also quickly disappeared. In comparison, the cut on the Tree of Chaos's branch was not a big problem. It healed in a short while, leaving only a huge, ugly scar. After all, as a huge tree, a mere 30-meter cut was at most a superficial wound. What was really worth paying attention to was the energy residue that surrounded the wound and emitted a faint glow. In order to prevent these things from invading, the Tree of Chaos secreted a large amount of gum-like isolators, completely enveloping them. Do you think I'm willing to take such a risk? If I hadn't acted quickly just now, I would have become a second Satara. Today, we have to destroy the Tree of Chaos no matter what. Otherwise, we'll never have a day of peace. As she said this, the injured Juggernaut's face showed a lingering fear. Without personally experiencing the feeling of having one's strength ripped away bit by bit, one would never understand how terrifying this weapon was. It could even be said that once one was firmly controlled by the vines, it was impossible to escape without using one's trump card. Understood. In any case, at this point, we have no way out. We can only do our best to achieve our goal. As she spoke, the female Juggernaut signaled to the other 2 companions beside her. In less than a minute, the 3 of them quickly distanced themselves, occupying a triangular position around the main branch of the Tree of Chaos. Then, they quickly activated some kind of spatial isolation ability or something similar. In the blink of an eye, the connection between the tree world and the planet itself was completely cut off, and the entire world was dragged to another space. There was no light. There was no water. There was no air. There was no substance. There was only a kind of energy that he had never seen before. When the Tree of Chaos was completely pulled in, the energy immediately began to boil, constantly trying to tear apart the tough bark and enter the trunk. They were like gangrene attached to the bone. Although their destructive power was not very strong, their advantage was that they were continuous and never stopped. This is your final trump card? Zhang Qing pursed his lips and mocked mercilessly. Don't be so happy yet. Soon, you will understand the most fatal part of this special space. The Juggernaut, who had almost been killed, laughed coldly as he took out several colorless, transparent crystals and crushed them into powder. At the same time, the other neutral sovereigns did the same. In the next second, the energy in the entire space, which was originally not very active, suddenly began to boil. It continuously produced an energy release that was hundreds of thousands of times more terrifying than nuclear fusion. In just a second, the Tree of Chaos suffered unprecedented damage. Most of its leaves and branches were charred black, and the main trunk was also covered in wounds. It seemed like it would not be long before it completely died. Because the Tree of Chaos was the largest, it suffered the most damage. Thus, Zhang Qing suffered much less. Although it was inevitable that he looked a little haggard, he did not suffer any serious damage. looking at his left hand that had been burned into a crystal by the terrifying energy just now. He did not panic at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and laughed loudly. Ha! Interesting. Using the fact that chaos and order were incompatible with each other, they created a phenomenon where matter and energy were torn apart. No matter if it was the Order faction main god or the Chaos faction main god, they would all be unavoidably injured. Only neutral parties like you can perfectly avoid this kind of tearing caused by mutual rejection. Oh, you've seen the essence of this place on your first try. A look of disbelief flashed through the female sovereign's eyes. What is it? Very strange. Don't forget, the endless thirst for knowledge and power has always been the greatest motivation for me to move forward. Ever since I became a sovereign, I've been researching those things above most powers. Of course, that includes chaos and order. But I'm very curious. Where did you find this mysterious energy that can allow chaos and order to coexist peacefully for the time being? Only when triggered will it erupt with shocking destructive power. Zhang Cheng seemed to not care about his crippled left hand at all as he raised the question he was most concerned about. Apologies, this is a secret of the neutral ring. We will not reveal it to outsiders. Now, I sincerely advise you to give up resisting and obediently let us complete our mission. Otherwise, you'll lose more than just an arm. The female sovereign warned meaningfully. A threat? What gave you the misconception that I've lost the ability to resist? No, you don't understand at all how powerful this tree of chaos is. Come, I'll show you frogs in a well what can truly break through the limits and the ceiling of sovereigns. With that last word, Zhang Cheng turned around and placed a finger on the scarred tree trunk. Instantly, the sovereign's power in his body resonated with the two souls within the tree of chaos. In less than 3 minutes, the dying tree recovered to its original state. Not only did it recover, but it also grew dozens of times more vines that frantically expanded into the surrounding space. Every vine tentacle was hungrily absorbing the chaotic energy in the space. When the ratio between order and chaos began to go out of balance, the microsecond balance was finally broken. Chaos and order began to produce a repulsive force that was countless times stronger than before. The sovereign at the very front was caught off guard and had half his leg torn off by the terrifying energy storm. If he hadn't reacted quickly enough and retreated in time, he would have been done for. Chapter 1209. What did you do? The Juggernaut, who had lost a leg, stared dumbfoundedly at the fence that was collapsing out of control. His tone was filled with intense shock and disbelief. What did I do? No, I didn't do anything. I just wanted you to understand how weak and laughable the so-called neutrality and balance are. Do you think that by maintaining the balance, the cycle of the entire material universe can be maintained indefinitely? No, that's impossible. Infinity and eternity have always been relative terms, not absolute terms. In fact, whether it's the Juggernauts or the entire material universe, there will come a day when they will slowly walk towards the end of their lives. What you're doing is merely prolonging this outcome. There's absolutely no way to stop it. Look at these energies of chaos and order. As long as you change the ratio of one side, you'll lose control over them. As Zhang Cheng spoke, he pushed the large amount of order power that he had separated out towards the enemy. In just a few seconds, this space had become the most dangerous place in the entire material universe. Ironically, the neutral juggernauts who didn't need to dodge at all were now like rats running across the street, desperately avoiding the tearing phenomena that appeared from time to time around them. As the balance was broken, it was as if the first domino had been pushed into this space, instantly causing countless chain reactions. The most terrifying thing was that there was no safe passage for them to leave. Even tearing space had become an impossible task. Everyone, this guy is much more difficult to deal with than we thought. There's no need to hide anything anymore. Let's show our trump cards and get rid of him. Otherwise, it'll be too late when the Chaos faction arrives. The female juggernaut quickly avoided the tearing phenomena that appeared around her and shouted at her colleagues in the distance. Didn't those Chaos fellows say that they would block the trouble for us? Another juggernaut frowned subconsciously. as he had a special form that resembled an elemental life form. His 2 eyebrows were actually 2 strips of flames. It looked very comical from afar. However, the problem was that no one was laughing at the moment. This was because as more chaos power was captured, the Tree of Chaos was also becoming stronger. Originally, it only needed 1 strike to sever the vine tentacles, but now it needed 3 to 4 strikes. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before everyone present became nourishment for the Tree of Chaos. Don't mention them. Those guys just want to use us. As long as we complete our mission, the Chaos Sovereigns will immediately appear. They might even launch a surprise attack. The female sovereign warned through gritted teeth. Damn it, I hate being forced into a corner like this. The one-legged Hegemin grumbled softly. Without another word, he took out a small bottle that emanated an astonishing amount of heat. The liquid was the color of magma. He pulled out the stopper and poured it down his throat. Boom! With a loud boom, the sovereign's heart seemed to explode. Dazzling golden light radiated from within, releasing a shocking amount of heat. It was like a star. The sand and stones on the ground were almost instantly vaporized, forming a large area of sparkling area. Come on, come and taste the heat of the first dead star since the birth of the universe. I promise that you'll like it after tasting it. As he spoke, this elemental dominus rushed over and opened his arms, as if he wanted to hug his opponent tightly and burn him to death with the blazing flame in his chest. A star? Ah, I see. Zhangqing nodded thoughtfully. You're not an ordinary intelligent life form at all. You're a remnant star after a true explosion. In other words, you're Star Titan. Unfortunately, you awakened too late. The star beneath your feet has already lost most of its power. Annoying little bug. Don't run if you dare. The Hegemin couldn't help but curse aloud as he missed his target. Sorry, I'm not interested in playing such a boring game with you. Forget it. I'll let you understand the true difference between us. Zhang Cheng didn't give his opponent a chance to speak. He controlled hundreds of vines and quickly bound this sovereign, who was emitting a shocking amount of heat and flames. Although one of the vines would be lit up every few minutes, compared to the harvest, it was nothing compared to taking a few vines. 1. After confirming that the sovereign was no longer able to move, he calmly controlled the other vines to restrain the other enemies. At the same time, he ordered them to begin severing the connection between the imprisoned sovereign and bowstring. No, you lunatic, you can't do this. Realizing the tragic fate he was about to face, the stellar sovereign began to struggle with all his might. At the most intense moment, he burned off dozens of vines. But in the end, he couldn't escape. When the last connection was severed, the sovereign's powerful strength began to decline rapidly. Finally, the strong light on his body dimmed. Unfortunately, you're useless now. Zhang Cheng used a lofty tone to sentence the captive to death. His heart was firmly occupied by coldness and chilliness. He threw the half-dead sovereign into the area where the tearing phenomenon was the most concentrated, as if he was throwing trash. In the blink of an eye, a sovereign was completely wiped out. Even his soul didn't enter the cycle of the universe. He was intercepted by the Tree of Chaos and used as precious nourishment for the growth of the inner core. As the entire process happened too quickly, the other neutral sovereigns didn't have time to react before they discovered that one of their companions had fallen into eternal death. No hesitation. No hesitation. There was no reverence at all. It was as if killing a sovereign who stood at the peak of all life was no different from slaughtering an animal. The terrifying silence lasted for a long time before it was broken by the female sovereign's angry roar. Bastard! You bastard! Look at what you've done. You actually killed him. Aren't we already in a state of war? What's the fuss about killing an enemy? Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. The coldness in his eyes made everyone present feel uncomfortable. But according to the rules of battle, a sovereign can't kill a sovereign. I'm sorry. Those are your rules, not mine. I have no obligation to abide by them. Also, instead of wasting time here, why don't we quickly end all of this? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1210. Without a doubt, the sovereigns were a group of proud, conceited, and self-centered fellows. Every single one of them believed themselves to be the most special and unique existence in the universe. In order to reflect this uniqueness, the oldest of them had signed an agreement to ensure that no matter what happened in the future, they would be able to live on forever. As the number of sovereigns increased and they split into different factions, this agreement gradually developed into a rule that everyone tacitly agreed to. Anyone who dared violate this rule would be severely punished. The initiators had been hunted down by the Council of Order for killing a sovereign and had no choice but to go into hiding. Now, Zhang Cheng was ignoring this rule as well. He had killed a sovereign in front of everyone and even openly admitted that he didn't care about the rules of battle. The only goal of war was to kill the enemy. This kind of action was undoubtedly challenging the most sensitive nerves of all the sovereigns in the neutral ring. In the blink of an eye, the remaining 9 sovereigns had simultaneously revealed their final trump cards. In a flash, the most terrifying powers of the universe filled this special space. Even Zhang Cheng, who wielded all of the Chaos Tree's power, lost an arm and a quarter of a shoulder. One had to know that this loss wasn't just a literal loss of limbs and organs. It was a serious injury that could never be healed. This meant that he would never be able to recover from it, no matter what method he used. And not bad. You were able to injure me to this extent. Looking at his shattered body, Zhang Cheng didn't reveal the slightest bit of panic. On the contrary, a faint smile appeared on his face. It was as if that broken body didn't belong to him, but to the enemy. This is the end of your madness. Surrender. We'll follow the rules and send you to where you belong, where you'll be imprisoned forever. The female sovereign seemed to believe that her side had won a complete victory, and she once again put on that haughty expression of hers. She didn't realize that to some people, eternal imprisonment was no different from death. Surrender? You seem to have misunderstood something. In truth, I've already decided to give up on this body to use as a key to open the door to another universe. As for you lot, you'll become the nourishment for this magnificent feat next. You will be the first to witness my true power. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng abruptly detonated the main string that had completely fused with him, forming a whirlpool of matter and energy. Its immense power easily destroyed space and dimensions. All of the sovereigns present were trapped. They couldn't retreat, couldn't escape, and couldn't even move. Damn it, what are you doing? The other hegemon was clearly starting to panic. This was because this terrifying vortex had temporarily cut off his close connection with the material universe. It was as if he was in a space completely isolated from the outside world. Within this space, the sovereigns were unable to rely on the privileges granted to them by the material universe to maintain their immortality. This also meant that if they were to receive a fatal attack now, they would definitely die and not just fall into a long slumber. Don't make a sound. Use your heart to feel the spirit that transcends all matter and energy. Zhang Cheng put a finger on his lips. You will either become stronger through self-affirmation, or you will be reduced to insignificant dust by the unparalleled spirit attack. Let me judge whether or not you fellows have the right to advance with me and search for the key to breaking through the final barrier. One of the sovereigns seemed to have discovered something. He immediately shouted at his companions, "Damn it! Hurry and stop him. He's going to open." Before he could finish speaking, Zhang Cheng once again fused with the Tree of Chaos and released all of the power he had seized. A second later, a beam of light mixed with black and white shot out for where he was standing. Everywhere it passed, space was cut into small pieces. In the middle of these small pieces of space, a miraculous world formed from endless white plains appeared. A few of the sovereigns didn't even have time to react before they were quickly swallowed up by the white plain. Their entire bodies gradually disappeared without a trace. Others sensed the danger and desperately tried to gather the broken pieces of space together to create a small shelter. However, how could Zhang Cheng let them do as they wished? Before they could gather much, he smashed them to pieces. He didn't even hesitate. He abandoned his body and the Tree of Chaos, leaving only his pure spirit and soul behind. The remaining sovereigns who hadn't died quickly sensed this and were instantly put in a difficult position. On one hand, they knew that if they didn't abandon their bodies, they would be torn apart by the powerful force of the spiritual universe in a few minutes at most. This was because the power of the sovereigns from the physical universe was strongly rejected here. On the other hand, they also understood that once they gave up their bodies, they would give up everything they had in the physical universe, including the great power that stood at the peak of the universe and the essence of eternal immortality. How does it feel to be controlled by your spirit? Make your choice. Let me see how much courage and exploration you sovereigns have left. Oh, I almost forgot to mention that the possibility of this torn space returning to its original state is basically zero. So in at most 5 minutes, you'll be broken down and assimilated. Zhang Cheng laughed wildly as he stated the cruel reality. At first, he hadn't planned on using this method to enter the spiritual universe. However, the mysterious space the neutral ring had pulled him into gave him a great deal of inspiration, resulting in this scene. In terms of breaking the boundary between two universes, the main chord was the door, and the sovereigns were the key. Zhang Cheng had only been the key to the sovereigns of the neutral ring, opening a door that belonged to him. As for how he could go back, he hadn't considered it for the time being. The most important thing at the moment was to observe the process of these sovereigns' transformation or death. From there, he would be able to determine the operating principles of the spiritual universe. Apart from this, he also needed to find those two fellows who were both enemies and partners. He would try to obtain some limited information from them. Chapter 12:11. In the depths of the boundless universe, in a region known as the Shattered Star, Jellu was leading a group of chaos sovereigns, carefully searching for something. As the name implied, the Shattered Star referred to a shattered star. Due to the abnormal gravity in this region, spatial rifts would often open up on their own, forcefully pulling in certain planets or galaxies and causing them to collide violently. This was especially true when two stars, neutron stars, or white dwarfs collided with each other. The resulting power wasn't something ordinary planets could withstand. Normally speaking, the astonishing energy they produced was enough to destroy everything in their surroundings, perhaps even creating a massive black hole. However, the abnormal gravity in this region prevented the creation of a black hole, allowing the remnants of the shattered matter to float in space. From a distance, they looked extremely dazzling and multicolored. However, only those who had a deep understanding of this region would understand just how dangerous this beautiful appearance was. Even sovereigns wouldn't be able to escape easily if they were drawn in. Fortunately, Jellu had made sufficient preparations for this trip. He turned to the fairy beside him and asked, "How is it? Have you found the entrance?" "Damn it. How many times do I have to tell you not to rush me? Those fellows from the neutral ring have hidden that place extremely well, even adding countless obstacles to prevent me from sensing it." The latter rolled her eyes in annoyance, her hands constantly moving left and right. One didn't need to ask to know that she was the sovereign who had helped Gelatear open a spatial rift, giving him the opportunity to infiltrate the Council of Order. "Apologies, I didn't mean to disturb you. I only hoped it would be faster. You have no idea how dangerous our newcomer is. The power he possesses is enough to cause a massacre," Jellu explained with a solemn expression. He would never forget the last time he had met Zhang Cheng. The madness in the latter's eyes, as well as his indifference and contempt for all living things. A slaughterer, a destroyer, and a destroyer without any apprehensions. "I don't understand. Since he's so dangerous, why do you still want to maintain a close relationship with him? Shouldn't we stay far away?" The fairy juggernaut blinked her eyes. That's a good question. In the beginning, I didn't know why. Maybe it was driven by strong curiosity, or maybe it was because his values and way of thinking were completely different from ours. But now, I understand what I desire from him. Gru revealed a calm smile. "Oh, what is it?" "It's transcendence. Do you still remember how long you've been in the position of sovereign? Do you still remember the time when you tried your best to climb the unreachable peak in order to break free from all restraints. That was right. Just like you mentioned, we've all fallen. We're afraid of losing everything we have now. We're not willing to risk our lives for that 1%, 1,000th, or even 1/10,000 chance. As he spoke, Gru's emotions became excited all of a sudden. His two rows of eyes flickered with the same radiance, making him seem like a completely different person from his usual calm state. Oh no, even you've gone mad. The unknown ruler held his forehead and made an expression that said, "You're hopeless." Crazy? Maybe. But Gru didn't care about this point. He smiled and shrugged his shoulders. To me, the most important thing isn't whether or not I can succeed. It's that I can see the path to surpassing sovereign. I don't wish to continue muddling my way to immortality. I'm more willing to give up my status as a sovereign in exchange for that 1/10,000th chance of success. All right, I know that we can't talk about this issue, so just help me find him. Before he finished speaking, the little fairy ruler, who had been jumping up and down all this time, suddenly stopped all activities. She carefully pressed her ear against the wall between dimensions. After a full minute, she raised her hand and snapped her fingers. She said with a smug expression, "I found him. Step back. I'm going to open it now." As the last word left her mouth, she immediately used her special ability as a sovereign. She tried to open a small opening and then slowly expand it. Wait. Gru obviously sensed something and wanted to stop this old friend of his who had a rather jumpy personality. Unfortunately, he was still a step too slow. The moment the small opening was opened, a terrifying spiritual power that was indescribable with words gushed out. It directly devoured all matter and energy around it. Shock, fear, despair. In a split second, Gru understood the terrifying truth behind the mental power. Without further ado, he used the broken pieces of space to form a shield and retreated at the speed of light. He didn't know how far he had retreated, but the spiritual power gradually dispersed and formed a giant black hole. Only then did he stop and breathe a sigh of relief. He really did it. There were 10 sovereigns in the neutral ring, but I'm afraid they're all done for. What? You mean he single-handedly killed 10 sovereigns of the neutral faction? The little fairy ruler, who was proficient in spatial energy, clearly wouldn't be killed so easily. She jumped out of the crack, her voice filled with unconcealable shock. Gru nodded lightly. Correct. Could it be that you haven't sensed that power from another spiritual universe? To a sovereign, that's the most fatal poison. Even the slightest bit of it can cause one to pay a disastrous price. Then what about him? Did he perish together with them? Perish together? Ha ha. No, he's not that kind of idiot. If I'm not wrong, he must have given up on the connection between his body and the physical universe. He entered the spiritual universe in a pure form to search for the mysteries of breaking through the limits. How about it? Are you interested in coming along? With that, Gru extended his insect-like appendages and extended an invitation to one of his few friends. However, the latter hurriedly shook his head and refused. Forget it. I'm not like you lunatics. I just want to live a bit more comfortably and do what I like. What a pity. Very well. Since that's the case, I won't ask for more. Everyone, the mission is complete. You can go back and report. As for me, I'm about to embark on an unknown journey. Perhaps this meeting will be an eternal farewell. Gru bowed to the remaining sovereigns and began to disintegrate his body, allowing his consciousness to slowly pass through the connection point.